Dr. Narco Longo.
Brought to you by the Florida Department of Magic. Welcome to Florida, baby.
Florida is the original Garden of Eden.
Florida has the highest concentration of freshwater springs in the world.
Florida oranges are the golden apples of mythology. A race of giant men once roamed this peninsula. The Smithsonian can suck my balls. Old World, Florida.
Yo.
Hi.
What's up, y'all?
Thank you for having me.
What's going
How's
on?
it going, guys? Shem's hosting, technically. Shem's the host, but what's up, guys?
Shout out to the chat. So,
How's everyone doing?
not too bad. Just had work today. Happy to be home now. What about you?
I'm glad we finally got to organise this because you've been telling me for months that you're going to organise this chat, and then I finally did it.
Yeah. Well, schedules were conflicting for a while, but
it was meant to be. I was on Instagram, and you popped up in the recommended, things I might like, and I was like, yeah, I do like that. I'm going to send him a message. So here we are. I think at first you were like, who the hell is this guy? So Shem clearly hasn't done a good job of relaying the message the other way. But hey.
No, that's not true. Not the best memory. Not the best memory, that's for sure. But
maybe it was just playing hard to get then, Like, I haven't heard of you.
Well, you kind of disappeared for a while. You dropped your supercut documentary, and then you kind of disappeared.
Yeah, I do have a habit of doing that. I was always intending to make more videos, but I think I was struggling where I wanted to go with it. I've got a million scripts. I started writing episodes like I'll do this one, then I'll do this one, and I ended up doing none of them, but I've got them all set there on the back burner. But yeah, it's just been an interesting journey, I guess. I've been away to visit some actual sites in Wales, boots on the ground, to get some footage. So I'm going to be putting that into a script I'm planning at the moment, which is touching us on the Christian stuff. It's all about Helen of the Cross, or as she's known, Helen of Constantinople, who supposedly went to Jerusalem. She was the mother of Constantine the Great, went to Jerusalem, found a piece of the cross, and then she brought it supposedly back to Rome. Some people say Britain, some say Triers in Germany. So yes, really interesting stories. We've gone to visit this cave where people believe a piece of the cross was put by Helen in Wales. So yeah, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing that video. The reason I wanted you guys to kind of talk is because you both look at this whole Tartaria narrative in a unique way compared to a lot of the other researchers on YouTube. You kind of go with more of the historical, like kind of focused in the Asian area or like the Ural Mountains, stuff like that. Western Asia. Dr. Longo, you kind of focus on America with Atlantis being in Florida and stuff like that, and the Moors, the Seminoles, all that good stuff. Thought it'd be interesting to see how you guys overlap, especially since Longo, you kind of say that the Finnish language is kind of the origin for a lot of things, and Luke, I know you've hinted in the past about Colburn and Welsh and stuff like that, so didn't know if there's any layover or anything we could try to connect there with those things.
Well, I mean, I'm going to warn you in advance. I'm very tired. It's 12:30 in the morning where I am. So if my brain isn't working 100%, I'm going to blame that. And I also chose the worst week to quit alcohol, which I didn't know makes you very tired. Yeah. So I'm double tired. Yeah. I had a weekend where I just
show of hands.
I was out drinking
and I in the chat, y'all.
Came home and I just thought, no, not anymore. Well, actually, do you know what the truth is? I couldn't be bothered going to the shop, and I just was like, if I don't drink again, I don't have to go to the shop again. So laziness won out, and here we are. But going to what you were saying about the Finnish language, I must admit, linguistics isn't my strong area, but the Kolbrin does have links to the Vinca culture. I was reading today in a book, great little book. Where is it? Here, this one. Should be right. Get it. Oh no, it's trying to mess with it. There we go. The Great Migrations to Britain of 1527 BC and 485. So this goes into basically a mixture of migrations of Assyrian and Cimmerian people. Cimmerians, obviously, the ones that go up into like the Danube and then up towards like the Scythian areas, located around Armenia and stuff like that. A lot of people believe in that area, or did do in the past, that they were the ones that landed, or some of the survivors, obviously coming from Noah. They've all originated in that area of like Ararat and spread north and south from there, going into like Turkey and southern Russia. So the Vinca culture, these guys officially are like 3,000, 3,000 odd BC that they would have been around. And the inscriptions are very similar to Colburn. And Wilson and Blackett, they claim to be able to literally translate Vinca scriptures using Colburn, which is essentially Etruscan. They're so close that Etruscan is they're from the same alphabet trail essentially. So that could be a link right there. The hardest bit for me is locating where it actually began, because these people seem to have been doing circuits all over Europe, going back and forth. So trying to say, oh, they started here, then they went there, it's just not that simple. It's like they went here, then they came back, then they went over there, then came back, then went over there again, spun around in a few circles, then came over here. So when it gets to that level, it's kind of like so specific, it's hard to even track, in my opinion anyway.
It does seem like it was just a kind of a worldwide trading system, at least, to where they could communicate, and maybe they had just a common lingua franca between them for the purposes of trading before the Bronze Age collapse. I know that some of these civilizations are said to be way before the Bronze Age collapse, but
yeah, 100%. I mean, if what we're told is to be true, that these kind of same symbols are found in the Americas, these similar looking things, then yeah, it could definitely point to that kind of Bronze Age societal thing. Because if anything, I think the Michigan copper for me is one of the biggest indicators that there might have been that kind of travel across, because there was just so much copper and it can't be accounted for. I mean, that doesn't necessarily made a big jump across the Atlantic, obviously, but it's interesting to think where did these people put it? If they can't account for it, I think 10% turns up in Native American areas, so they can't find about 90% of it. And some people say, well, maybe they were bringing it across to Europe. Maybe the Romans were bringing it across, but obviously these are all just stories at this point. But that'd be interesting to hear your opinion.
Yeah, because Longo, you pointed out the traces of Ogham, or like the Irish language, being found in America before, right?
Oh yeah. And just Luke, it's great to finally meet you, man. I know I wasn't super familiar with your work, but I know a lot of people who I respect deeply have respect for your work, and I watched your videos. They're super well researched. So we're happy to have you on Old World Florida, and glad to meet you, dude. And
thank you.
I just had a interview with a British dude who was also in England, like right before this, and he was like knocking out, like he was about to fall asleep right at the end, and that was like 2 hours ago.
Well,
but appreciate you coming on. And well, this is Shems hosting it, but it just whatever. But
I really appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And go give him a subscribe, guys, if you're in here. Go check out his stuff. But in Florida, and to your point, Luke, about you guys both had good points. But Luke, you mentioned like the runaround game. Like almost every ancient civilization is like flashing these same symbols, and you could say they went here, then they went here. And if you're taking the linear path, it's always hard to trace. It's always going to be like playing, staring at dirt and expecting like the answers to just pop up. But it's ancient for a reason, But astrology is always a very reliable guiding factor. So to me, everything leads north because of the symbols that are so universal. Many of them have an undeniably polar or centric, like polar centric or Hyperborean origin. And they're clearly, for example, the swastika, or however, whatever other names there are for it, that cool, symbol, no matter who it belonged to, all around the world, Native American, everyone knows this, India, all over. But people don't understand that it's very much a northern symbol. It's a polar symbol. So this isn't like one country in the north. And I only ever focus on Finland because they're so They have so much to say about the bullseye, right? The centered dot. That whether you're ball or flat Earth doesn't matter. The North Pole's the relative center for every calculation that there is, right? And the Swazi, right? That thing is clearly a polar symbol, and it's most perfectly observed from the North Pole. The effect, the twisting effect, and the fact that it you can tie it to a post, and they would have almost like firecrackers on each side of this stick, like a plus sign, like a cross, pretty much. And they'd have a firecracker on each side, and they'd spin it, they'd light it on the holidays in Finland, and this would form like a neon Swazi. And it's crazy. So I've never seen any other culture do that, but the Finns are super in touch with that. So Etruscan is like the best place to start teeing off when it comes to just like, history in the West in general, because they're the first, right? You could say it's Phoenician language, Etruscan alphabet. Ultimately, to me, it always points back north. That's the big deception that I think we've all swallowed, is that Etruscan or Phoenician came first, then the runes came. To me, it's always been the runes came first and trickled down from there to all the other continents, to all the other peoples. The Etruscans were the first colony, early colony from the North Pole. And when you look at Etruscan busts and how they painted themselves, clearly they have Nordic features.
Well, I mean, I would argue that the Etruscans themselves don't come from the north, but because I mean, just off sources, I don't have my sheets here, but I believe the original Etruscans were known as Tyrrhenians, and that was based on the king Tysenos, who the story goes that they were Lydians, in Anatolia during a great famine, and the king decided, after so many years of famine and war and all this, it was around the time apparently of late Trojan War, but the king decided he was going to send away half of the civilization, and he gave his son to them as well, say, oh, I'm doing it as well, and he'll be king. And they went off to find a new place to live, and they became known as Tyrsenians, or eventually Tyrrhenians, and that obviously would tie them back to this Lydian place in Anatolia. I mean, you could argue that maybe that story's been transplanted, but those themselves, I would definitely say they came from Turkey.
Well, a whole lot of people certainly landed in Turkey after some cataclysms, Caucasian.
Definitely. I'd say you've got thousands of years between Vinca culture, like with what I was talking about earlier, what you observed like higher up around the Danube. So, yeah, you could easily say if it's there in 3,500 BC, then obviously by the time we get to 500 BC, you've had 3,000 years. So, yeah, definitely the language itself is much older. So, yeah, it could come from the north. One interesting link is that it's tied to the Egyptian hieroglyphs, which makes sense because obviously you had the exodus of the Jews out of Egypt, and then they intermingled with the Neo-Assyrian Empire. They were obviously captured under all the numerous Assyrian kings, Salamander, all that. And then they left with the Trojans after like the Trojan War. They all migrated. They went with the Etruscans. There's a story. There's a Lemnos Stele that has a story talking about this. So in Lemnos, it tells this story about how they migrated. So if you look at the hieroglyphs today, because Welsh is so closely related to this old language, Welsh is like it's one of the most unchanged languages, because for almost 1,000 years, even more really, it's been suppressed by the British establishment, because Britain's always been run by different people like Normans, obviously Northmen, Vikings, Germans. So these guys didn't really allow the Welsh to have their own language. At certain points, it was literally banned to even write in Welsh. Multiple times they tried to exterminate it. So because of that, it's inadvertently not changed. It's retained a lot of its old linguistic things. It's not intermingled with other languages. So because of that, you can use Welsh with Colbrin or Etruscan to translate things like Lemnos Stele and stuff like that. And you can do the same with hieroglyphs. So if you take hieroglyphs, you look at what a hieroglyph is. There's a great book that I'll send you a link for called Comroglyphics.
Yep.
And if
I'm very familiar with Wilson,
Oh, brilliant.
Broadstock, Blackett. Very
Yeah.
familiar with those guys.
Yeah. So obviously, if you use that that Welsh to Egyptian link, that's putting you back to whenever, you know, we're looking at 2500 BC in Egypt. So it's still
Right.
not as old as Vinca, but you can see that link's obviously come down to Africa at least, and then it's made its home at some point in the hieroglyphs. So it's so broad over, and it's covering thousands of years. It's
Okay.
like a.
Have you ever seen how the Etruscans depict themselves, like the tombs of Tarquini?
Oh
And,
yeah.
they do
look
the
quite.
bowl. So they're
Yeah,
rather
yeah.
Nordic, right? And those are features that wouldn't really fit with the Mediterranean if they had been so, adapting there for thousands of years. And the use of red body paint is very much in line with Vikings who are getting sunburnt from the north.
Oh yeah. Don't worry, I'm not arguing with you. I think
Right.
it's a very interesting point that I haven't explored myself, so I'd have to look into it. But one thing that I wanted to bring up would be DNA evidence. I think from the Etruscans. Yeah, they worked out that even the Tuscan cattle. So in Tuscany, their Tuscan cattle, even they come from Turkey. So you can see this migration. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that these Turkish people weren't Nords, because that
Right.
could easily be it. But they found that the people from this area share the most genetic markers with these same groups from Turkey. So basically, they're the same people, the Etruscans, and they're very different from the other Latin groups. And obviously, they started, like we say, the Roman stuff. They were in charge from about 650 BC to, I think, 509, when their last king Tarquinius was taken down and the Roman Republic started. So, yeah,
when you're
there's
talking
definitely the
about
genetic link.
when you're talking about subjugated peoples, right? Like we're saying, Welsh and different areas of research, certain hidden languages, certain hidden keys to, ancient rock carvings and stuff have been suppressed. You'd imagine how, like, if there's a level of suppression where a language is getting kind of taken out of people's mouths, there's probably a lot of R wording going on too. And you know how bottlenecked some populations can be. Genetics aren't always the way to go. They can sometimes be backwards, right? If you're seeing, like you're saying, these guys in Turkey might be Norse, but the Etruscans, I've seen a lot of so-called genetics about Finnish people and Sumerians, right? And if you're looking at Sumeria as our mainstream starting point for like the Middle East and the cradle of civilization, I'm big into words. I do a lot of toponyms, right? I'm big into folk etymology, you could say, which I'd agree. I think you're into as well with, that's Ross Broadstock's Bread and Butter and Alan Wilson too. They're toponymists too. And you ever gotten into Isaac Taylor?
No.
So Isaac Taylor's a toponymist too, who is big into Celtic origins, Welsh origins for a lot of these Middle Eastern peoples and even Israelites, things like that. And his whole thing was he came down to a skull size theory because, you can have like an oil change and mixing mitochondrial DNA can almost be like an oil change when it comes to DNA. And sometimes the father line can get kind of swept away, or the mother's line can get swept away, and you lose that foundation of where an origin was. But Isaac Taylor, they didn't have this fancy, genetic equipment and stuff back then. He's 1800s. I don't know if he was Jesuit, but he was a Christian toponymist, and he was, researching all these people and had some out there theories. His whole thing was head shape. And he said, well, hey, genetics, language, that stuff can be like a game of telephone or deceiving, a murky, muddy water. He said that head shape was a big, big telling factor, that the original progenitors of European people was a wide-headed and tall-headed people, that the Slavs were a small and narrow, short and narrow-headed people, that the Finns and the Celts both matched the head shape for this large and wide head shape. And the Anglo-Saxons, the Germanic peoples, they had a narrow head, tall and narrow, so not wide. You see people like John C. Reilly, Jesse Pinkerton, or whatever his name is, Matt Damon. Sometimes this Irish head shape is just like ridiculously massive and square in size. So, you can track skeleton. And when you start looking at, that's why I say, you look at how they depict themselves. The bridge of the nose can be a telling sign. The shape of the head, of course, whether someone has Arctic features or Mediterranean features should be visually obvious. Evidence is what's evident, right? Like genetics isn't necessarily evidence because it's very obscure and hard to access information. Evidence would be like what's painted on a wall, evident. So a lot of these, and the toponyms, Isaac Taylor, the same guy who was into skull shapes, he would break down words the same way the Bach saga would. And he said that the Finns were the progenitors of the Celts. The Celts were the progenitors of the subsequent Germanic peoples. And then over time, which I would agree with, the Finns were swept over by Asiatic people. That's why they have, squinty eyes today and don't look as Viking as they did, 5,000 years ago. And that the Celts, like the Welsh, the Scottish, the Irish, that they are the last remaining purest, Northern European peoples. And probably, like you're saying, their cattle is linked. I would wager that they were spreading everything from the north downward. It's always the way I look at it. It's the Bach saga is a big support on that. And Isaac Taylor, we can pull up in his Wikipedia. I think
you mentioned something interesting in one of your videos in the past too about the population of Ireland was like 5 million Irish, and then in America it was like 15 million or 13 or some between 15 and 20 million or something.
35 million. Yeah.
Oh wow, even more. So yeah. Look.
The German population's around there too, though, but they don't have as small of a original population too. So, but you could say the Irish just like bang like rabbits, though. Maybe.
Well, I think not only DNA and language, but you can look at the symbols that a lot of these cultures use and the religion that they practice, and it pretty much links them all together in some way. I mean, I know you have minor tweaks between them, but the swastika is a good example because the middle of the swastika, right, is probably Polaris, or the Phoenician star, Phoenicia, used for navigation for these trading routes among these people. They had to basically be educated and initiated into the understanding of how to use the stars to navigate.
Yes. So Shem, that's a good point. Are you must be familiar with Connor McDarry?
Yeah, a little bit.
Are you Luke?
No, remind me. I'm bad with names.
Connor McDarry wrote Irish Wisdom Preserved in the Bible and Pyramids, or something like that.
Okay.
And he's very much in line with Wilson, Blackett, Broadstock, and his whole thing is toponyms too, like breaking down names. If we're talking about the origin of phonetic language, show me the names and the phonetic links will be in them, because ultimately the consonants don't change too much throughout time. Phoenician, saying that the Phoenicians didn't call themselves Phoenician doesn't take away from the fact that, as Connor McDarry said it, why have the powers that be done everything they can to spell Phoenician with which is supposed to be the origin of phonetics as we know it? Why is it the least phonetically spelled word? Why is it complicated? Phoe. It's like a joke. He said, should the word Phoenician ever be spelt as it should, Finn, the deception could no longer be sustained. Everybody would see through it. That Phoenician, the Finns as in Finnish. Finnish is Phoenician. Sumerian is Suomi, which is what the Finnish call themselves. Phenis, meaning something's beautiful, or it's purple, or it's shining, or it's bright, or any of those things valuable, is the same meaning that you find when you say a girl's fine, that she's fine. And Finland is the finish line of all mythology. It's the finial. It's the tippy top. If you want to define a word, you need to go to Finland to do it. You don't want to be a deaf Phoenician. Deaf Finnish. I know this is all silly stuff, but people like, Wilson, all those guys would put a lot of weight behind what's in a title. And Finnish, right down to the love act and fertility worship. What does it mean to finish?
So in this concept, then, are you suggesting then that all these kind of stories of, like, for example, Noah, would that be something that has been transliterated from something that occurred much further north? Is that the kind of belief system that you would work from?
I think Noah's a bit later. Noah's post-Atlantis. This would be Atlantis and pre-Phoenician.
So I mean, at one point. Well, I mean, are you saying that these people, were they the only people that would be populated? Because at what point would they not intermingle with, obviously, other races? I mean, within a couple hundred years, usually you'd say that they've pretty much fully assimilated. At what point would they stop, in your eyes, being Finnish, if you know what I mean, and just start being the people that they are?
The people that inhabit all the other
European countries. Because I mean, we put stupid names on things anyway. I mean, I was thinking about this when I was talking about the King Tysenos, right? In the old days, you would move, let's say I decide, right, I'm starting a new kingdom, and you two are going to be my first guys. You're going to come with me, and you're going to be known as Lucians from now on, right? Then in 100 years, you guys might decide, or your children's children decide to go follow someone else, and you suddenly get called, Floridians. And it's like, if you actually think about it, how much have we actually changed? But we've changed names like 3 or 4 times, or 5 times, 6 times. So you've got this complicated list of name changes. But as people ourselves, we've barely even changed. We might not have even intermingled with locals. We might have stayed completely separate.
But there's also, especially when we're talking about the Indo-European, language group. Remember, there's words like mother and father and anchor that haven't changed for literally as far back as you look back in history. They've been saying father, mother. Some of the names for the planets too are some of the most objective.
I suppose that's because they work, isn't it? Why change them?
Yes, anchor is a big one though, because it ties into English. Because English is Anglish. These are the anglers. This is also Sorry, my cat's making noise. It's anchorish. And the Druids are the people who drew it up. So yes, this all points to the Finns and the Celts. But
if you were to be really specific, they weren't Angles, they were Engels. Angles, something modern. They changed it to they were Engels. So
okay, but I'm saying that it ultimately goes back to Ingvi, who would be the equivalent of Enki, who would be the equivalent of Neptune or Poseidon. When it's in the stars, you don't have to say it came from here, is kind of my whole spiel. You don't need to trace. This is kind of the answer to the dilemma that we're wrestling with, is tracing a name place to place. Let's say I'm Christian, and I was Christian because I found a Bible at the park and no one found me do it, right? 100 years from now, Is there going to be evidence that I converted to Christianity? No, because I didn't walk into a church. I didn't sign up for a class, put my name down or anything. So it's not always the linear trace that's going to be there for us. But when you're looking at astrology, you're looking at it as objective as it gets. In the natural world, Adam and Eve didn't have the Bible. They didn't have a printing press or even an inkwell. So God wrote them the Bible and the stars. And the zodiac's been there forever. If we want to know about the Phoenicians, it's going to be hard looking in the dirt and stuff, or the Etruscans. It's going to be hard digging up their temples, but we can rest assured we can look at the same stars that they were looking at. That's probably the easiest access point.
Well, speaking of that, actually, what you've just said about looking at the same stars, have you heard the notion that the swaths not to be named was a reference to the idea of the wandering pole, as in if the sky doesn't look like this, we're in danger, basically, because obviously you might have heard the catastrophism style model of maybe the Earth going through, goes through sudden shifts or sudden changes. And the first sign that something bad is happening is the North Star would start to move because the planet's going into a bad orbit or something. Let's say something comes along and affects it gravitationally. And if we're talking about a post-flood world, I mean, not even necessary because we don't know how many cataclysms there's been, but even post-flood, you think that whatever caused that would be ingrained in their memories and in their stories for millennia to come. So, if they were trying to tell their kids this really bad thing happened, and the first thing we noticed was this star was out of position, usually it looks like this, but it actually looked like this today. And that was the warning sign kind of thing. Would that possibly explain that?
You could argue that the initiation to the mystery religions is kind of giving that information out.
Well, I think the coral castle and guide stones and things like that, it's only two alternatives. It's either they're trying to prove to people that we live in a geocentric Ptolemaic world, Ptolemaic model worldview, or it's exactly what you're saying, that it's hey, keep an eye on this, or else if it drifts off from here, then you're in trouble. I'll be honest, though, I tend to just reject catastrophism. I think that only God has the keys to Mother Nature like that. Only God knows when the people have transgressed enough to be wiped off the face of the earth or a single continent. And that all of this stuff is really just doomerism, like saying that it's all in man's hand, because I'm not saying either of you believe this, but a lot of this Tartaria stuff gets into this, like, we're just ants in an ant pile waiting to get reset again, and everything's, futile. So a lot of people place it in man's hands. But I'm with you, though, that if it's astrological, you'd be looking for the North Pole for the pole shift, because that's one of the big things that they push. But that's another thing is, the beauty of geocentrism is that it takes away this fear of a pole shift, because, maybe you could say that's naive or like, being ignorant. But if there's only one pole, the shift isn't as catastrophic as it is with a ball model. And the original Finnish mythology was that we live on, I'm not going to say a disk, not a disk floating in space, but a geocentric, flat, Ptolemaic model type thing. And that the pole's at the center. It's like a grand obelisk at the center. And that if that were to drift, you're just talking about a change in weather. Whereas a pole shift on the Neil deGrasse Tyson model, now you're talking about everyone's faces getting ripped off at 1,000,000 miles an hour the second we hit a little turbulence. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And I've got people who call me all day saying the next pole shift is coming, the next pole shift is coming, and a lot of times it's like a just total doomerism. And I don't know, with astrology, I've learned it's never like a grand stroke. It's never like a sudden crack of the whip. that some of these grand astrological happenings are just openings of the door, and it takes a long time for the change to be felt. And
it's interesting that you'd bring up that, actually, because I was actually going to ask you about the flat Earth, because I noticed obviously you did Old World Order with Hibbler, and he's done quite a few flat Earth videos.
Sure, yeah.
So I just wanted to ask your thoughts, but you did it for me. So one thing I would actually ask you, see if you're interested in this, is have you heard about the final experiment? It's a guy called Will Duffy. I've just interviewed him a few days ago, because he's doing a trip to Antarctica, and he's inviting a load of flat earthers to join him. I think he's like 1, 2, or maybe 3 people he's actually going to pay for their journey. It's $31,000 otherwise. So I mean, I'm trying to see if he'll let me go as well. You know, I want to prove it. Whatever, I don't care. I'm neutral. I want to see it. I just want to touch down in Antarctica, bless the earth, you know, in the name of Jesus Christ. But yeah, would you be interested in doing something like that, going into Antarctica to see the 24-hour sun for yourself?
Not really. I got shit to do in Florida, but it'll be on video, right?
Yeah, well, hopefully. They say they're going to video. There's going to be loads of people going. I mean, I want to go to. I probably won't be able to get to go because, like I say, I'm not a prominent flat earther. I don't make flat earth videos or anything. You know, it's not my lane, so I stay in my lane. But I did the interview because it's interesting, and I think, you know, autodidactic. Have you met Campbell from autodidactic before?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. We're doing an interview as well next Monday or Tuesday, depending what time zone you're in. So with Will talking about it. So obviously Campbell's flat as well. So that's going to be interesting. You should tune in.
You were doing some research before into the magnetic pole moving towards Lake Baikal or something.
Yeah, well, I did a short video a while back, which was doing exactly what you were complaining about, a bit of doomerism about the pole shift. So, oops, guilty. But yeah, it is fun because I was going into the actual magnetic pole moving, which is something, again, I was going to bring up. How do you think that kind of fits into your model? Because obviously, on your model, there shouldn't really be a magnetic north, should there? Just wandering around.
Yeah, I think, you know, I don't know. I'm not into magnetics or super big on the North Pole. You know, I spend most of my time researching Florida, but I am pretty passionate about a story called the Bach Saga. And I think that's pretty on the money with a lot of the phonetic, linguistic ties and Viking history being rewritten, Atlantean history being rewritten, and things like that. But they focus the Bach Saga focuses pretty hard on a pole shift, believe it or not. And they say that it's kind of just like, it's just you know, the pole it doesn't go far. It's not like it, you know, boom, whips around to Hawaii or some shit and the whole world you know, flip-flops. It's more that it was in Helsinki, according to this one story. And this is very cool if you're into the phonetic ties and the toponyms. Helsinki, the North Pole originally was Helsinki. That was the finish line. That was the grand finial, tippy top of every world model was Finland. And it moved pretty much to where, like, over Canada or, you know, near Greenland, where they say it is today. And that brought the Ice Age. And because of the Ice Age, that is why European people were created. They naturally evolved adapted by being trapped in the ice during the Ice Age. And feathery hair, light features, light eyes, wide eyes, thin nostrils, a high bridge. A lot of, you know, Nordic features were just the result of living in the ice and getting bleached. And you find the most blue-eyed animals closest to the North Pole. You find the most white and blonde hair in animals closest to the North Pole. And it's just pretty evident. Like I said, I'm big on evidence, and that is a big sign that, well, this whole story says the pole shift triggered the Ice Age, which triggered the separation of the races, and that was the creation of the human race. That before that, there was just man, and man was, you could say, one race. Some of my, right-wing 4chan fans don't like it when I say that. We're all the same one, family that's kicked off in the beginning in Browntown. But,
Your cube.
But yeah, so all these people come from the Finnish, and then the Dan line and the Sven line come from the original Finnish line. And that's where you get the Danish tribe of Dan, Danube. And the Sven is the Swedish and some of the Viking bloodlines too. But the North Pole
Interesting. Oh, sorry to interrupt there. Go on,
No,
carry on.
that's it. This is also the Atlantis stories. All the land is ice. And Helsinki, the story of the pole shift in Helsinki is the same story as hell freezing over and Atlantis sinking.
Do you think
Helsinki.
they could be connected? Yeah, nice. Helsinki. Wow. One thing I was going to ask you actually is you talked about this. I just something twigged. Have you ever heard of the British Edda or Edda? I don't know if you want to pronounce it.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was originally put together by Colonel Waddell, I think it was, 1930s, but it's based on really old stories. They say that they're really old. We don't know how old they are, but it's based on this hero called King Adam Thor, and it's literally he's proper named after Thor. It seems very related to the Nordic Thor and that kind of idea. They think it would have been around 3380 BC, and Thor came from like the Danube Valley, and they considered him to be Gothic. But obviously, this is 3,000 years before what we would consider Goths. So,
Yes.
and obviously, Gothi, they're just, it's another word for it. Scythian, which again, they're just names for
Yes.
same people. Yeah. And I just found that really interesting because he was having battles with somebody called the old serpent matriarch called El, and he was having battles with her, and she kidnapped his wife, and they considered, I think there was a place called, the eastern border of his empire was called Carchemish, which they considered to be the original Garden of Eden and stuff like that. And this evil El stole one of his wives, which is kind of like an Eve, but it's also resembles Helen from the actual Helen of Troy stories because his palace was called Troy. So, when you think about Helen and Troy being stolen by the Greeks, or whichever way you want to see it, there's actually might be this archetypal story from 3,000 years earlier, which is kind of cool.
So it's the Goths, and according to the Bach saga, which is the best explanation to me of, everyone's arguing about why do you say God? We can all disagree about who God is, but in the English language, we're all going to be totally okay with using the word God, lowercase or uppercase, to say the gods, this is God. You could say creator or whatever, but people always say God, even if we're disagreeing. Jewish God, Muslim God. Well, God, according to the Bach saga, goes back to go. And that's why today you hear, but this is a little kind of a schizo link, but the greatest of all time, to be the goat of something is to be the greatest of all time. To be the goat is Capricorn, which is the winter solstice, which is God's favorite day, apparently. And then you've got the Goths, like you're saying, progenitors of many European peoples, and Gothic being tied in with Freemasonry. This all goes back to Finland, too. You've got places like Gothenburg, Gotland, up there, Sweden and Finland. And also all the hells, according to the Bach saga, go back to Helsinki. That hell, El, yes, it's the principal deity of the Phoenicians, but it's also Hellenic, Helvetic, right? And the Finnish line, the L, it's totally to say that Thor is opposed to El is to say that Jupiter is opposed to Saturn, and that's an eternal conflict, and it's
Yeah, 100%.
It's the main event in most mythologies. Usually,
Yeah, this kind of idea of Jupiter replacing Saturn as the king.
Yep.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you'd mentioned that again. There was one thing that I was going to bring up and I forgot to note it down, so now I've completely forgotten. So you carry on. But I was one thing I was going to say, you definitely need to change your channel name to Old World Finland, because this is the I'm liking all the Helsinki links.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm partly why I'm passionate about this is our bookstore here is in Lake Worth Beach, Florida. Lake Worth Beach is the Finnish capital of the Americas. It has the highest concentration of Finnish people in the Americas. So Minnesota has the most, like, total number, but right here it's a very, very high concentration. And
when was the migration?
Well, most of them came around World War II, either before World War II or after World War II for fishing. But it's the Gulf Stream that brought them here spiritually, right? We've all heard about salmon returning to their spawning point, right? Psychic memory. Well, the Finns love it here in Florida, and the Gulf Stream plays a big, big role in a lot of mythologies, like the Bok Saga. And anytime you're talking about Atlantis, you've got to be talking about the Gulf Stream. If you're talking about the Phoenicians leaving the Pillars of Hercules, we've got to take into account the Gulf Stream. And the Gulf Stream originates and returns to the Gulf of Mexico, right off the coast of Florida, Tampa Bay. Florida is the highest concentration of freshwater springs in the world. That's why the Gulf Stream is always consistently pumping out of there. No matter where the sea level's at, that much water is still pumping out of Florida. So the Gulf Stream is always there. If Noah's Ark crossed the Atlantic, it probably hitched a ride on the Gulf Stream, or some form of that, whatever that would look like, in the most tumultuous seas ever. But that's my whole thing.
You think Noah ended up in Florida then?
Yeah, maybe some of the Welsh researchers won't agree with this, but maybe we'll just have to agree to disagree on astrotheology, and maybe everyone had their own version. But
I really find it interesting. I've read a lot of books that go into the idea of obviously the old world being America, but in that more sense of it being peopled. Sometimes people think it's from the east, from the west. But before we move on, there was one thing I just wanted to quickly bring up, because I remembered it. When you were talking about the goat, greatest of all time, and all that, I don't know if you will necessarily believe in this because of your specific model, but I don't know if precession of the equinoxes is something that you agree with. But this idea, obviously, that we're moving through the zodiac, you definitely do agree with, right? Because obviously astrology. Yeah. So I presume you obviously then know full well all about the fact that for 2,000 odd years we were in the age of the bull, and then as soon as we moved into the age of the ram, you have the story of Moses telling them stop praying to the bull, and and then the Jews start blowing the ram's horn, and then obviously we enter the age of Pisces, and the oldest Christian symbol is of course the fish. So do you think there's a possibility this notion is that God is just represented by a different symbol as we move into a new age, and it's just kind of blasphemous to carry on using the old one?
That's a very high IQ take. Absolutely. That's probably spot on. I don't know how much it's conscious though. Like, astrologers are not always ruling the world. So I can promise you that people live the astrology, even if it's not consciously being like forced into society. Like Florida is born 3/3 Pisces. All the ancient earthworks in Florida are arranged to Pisces, either the fishhook or the whale part of Cetus or Cetus, or any part of the fish. All of the Pisces constellation is represented in Florida, in the macro, in the micro. So do I think the Illuminati like put the birthday of Florida on a specific day to match Pisces. No, I think God just lets it land like that sometimes. But that's one of my favorite things to talk about. It's a great question. Moses was the Moses. It's the cow, it's the Taurus. Moloch Moloch. This is milk.
Yeah.
MLK. Moloch. That's the milk, right? Like in what's it called? Clockwork Orange. They have the Molkovo, right? Milk. All the root words milk go back to Taurus and the bull. Even Melchizedek a little bit. But absolutely, Taurus to Aries. Abraham is April. Abra, opening the door. Aries, the beginning. And then you've got Pisces, like you said. Today it's Aquarius. And you've totally have Aquarius, the god is Uranus, right? You had Mars ruling over Aries. You had Venus ruling and the moon ruling over Taurus, the age of Taurus. You had Jupiter, Jesus, Jupiter, Peter, first pope after Jesus, Peter, Harry Potter, King Arthur, Thor, all these guys are Jesus, Jupiter, ruled the last 2,000 years. St. Peter's Basilica was struck by lightning when the last pope resigned. Trump Tower was struck by lightning during close to the Jupiter-Saturn eclipse, ushering in the age of Aquarius. That was the last hurrah of Jupiter. Made great signs in the sky in notable places, flashes of lightning. St. Peter's Basilica being the most notable because that's a temple to Zeus, to Jupiter, etc. And then Pisces, of course, the fish, like you said, Jesus being the fish. Last thing he put in his mouth was fish, even though he's a vegetarian, Essenian. And then Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. Uranus is also Janus. This is a god of technology. It's a god of social media, digital web universe, all of these new concepts that there was no conception of them, no, familiarity with these concepts 2,000 years ago, right? Digital world, what the hell is that? In Pisces, they had access to whole worlds that we're not going to have access to in the age of Aquarius. There was a whole digital world that you can inhabit. It was a religious one. People would go into prayer, and it was more of an habitable space that you could go into, more accessible to everybody. Now it's it was as accessible as the internet is today, this spiritual realm. Today with Aquarius, everyone's online, everyone's going gender neutral, LGBT, this is all Aquarius. Aquarius is the most gender neutral sign of the zodiac. Uranus, Janus is in between, right? Two faces on the same god. And you can see the way people are acting today. Aleister Crowley kind of predicted it too. Bisexuality, LGBT, just everything you're seeing. Life's not going to change too much. That's something that we can rest assured with. Astrology shows us life is never going to change too much. We're always subject to the same cycle going around. Just takes different forms, different manifestations. Like today is all digital and techie and lit up and neon and stuff like that. But same sins, same virtues, same heavenly bodies animating all the activity down here.
And do you think then that the Messiah is coming back for Aquarius? Do you think that's something that's said in the Bible? Or
it's the Antichrist. It's the age of the Antichrist. The beauty of the ages is that they go backwards. So when you're saying Antichrist means before. Anti, to antedate something. Auntie, this is also an ancient word too, believe it or not, like ent or ant. Like your nephew is your Neptune. who's also, this is an uncle relationship, who's Enki, right? All the family, this is why I was saying, like, father is Jupiter, you know,
What?
mother is Earth, and things like that. All these words have a objective meaning. So, but hang on, what was I just talking about, Shem?
Just
Sorry.
Uranus being the double form, kind of androgynous era in Aquarius.
Luke, you asked a good question. I think I forgot.
When I was talking about the Aquarius link, as in Jesus moving into it,
Yes,
or
thank you. The Antichrist. It's the
Right.
Messiah is not going to come back like people think. There's no millennial reign of Christ. That stuff is made up bullshit. Totally made up. To try and say that like we're living that right now is such a narcissistic thought. It's the same thing with doomerism. It goes both ways. The doomerism is like, oh, I'm so special. The world's ending in my lifetime. Right. You know, step aside, George Washington, and future people. The world's going to end in my lifetime. And the whole Jesus coming back thing is the same shit. It's just the other side of the mirror is thinking I'm so special that Jesus is going to come back in my lifetime. No. But what is going to happen in our lifetime is we're making a switch from Pisces to Aquarius, and that is the Antichrist. Aquarius is the Antichrist because it's going to largely undo the teachings of Jesus, but people should not get startled. It's a natural transition. It has to happen. It has to happen the same way that Jesus showed up and flipped the script on the age of Aries, the blood sacrifice.
and when you say undo the teachings of Jesus, what do you mean by that?
Well, I don't mean it in a heretic way, but
Yeah, you're suddenly just like, oh shit.
basically, it's going to be updated. Jesus is the same spirit, the same spark of revelation, truth, righteousness will return and will be here throughout, no matter what. Jesus is not going anywhere. But in terms of Piscean creeds, like, turn the cheek and have absolute mercy and things like that, haven't been completely translated into digital thought and social media thought and things like that. There's going to be a new religious concept that penetrates the digital world too and acts as a code of conduct throughout social media. And what does the Bible say about fucking AI and 5G and downloading your consciousness to a chip? That stuff isn't necessarily addressed in a modern way. Now, the Bible's a timeless document, don't get me wrong, just like the Old Testament is. It's still relevant today, even though it's written in its age. But something's going to come. It's going to have to come, and
do you think that Jesus, when he's talking about the story of Passover, I think it's in Luke 22:10, and he tells them to go to the house with a man holding a pail of water and wait for them there. Sorry. It's obviously talking about Aquarius. Man holding a pail of water, a jug of water, is Aquarius, and he's telling, because they said, what do we do when when you're gone? He's like, go over there and wait for me. So would that not be a hint? But I mean, I'm of the camp that obviously Christianity is derived from obviously other things itself. So the story is contextual. It's based on, like you say, that Christianity is the fish age of religion. So obviously it's focused on that. Its main kind of contextual outlook is always going to be based on itself in that kind of narcissistic way. We're the religion now kind of thing. And that's inherently going to be part of it, isn't it? Because nobody's going to stand up like, guys, we're not the chosen people, but we might be one day. So everyone's always the chosen people, aren't they, in their own story? So the Jews, the chosen people before the Christians then become the chosen people because Christ decides, Jesus comes down and goes, oh, actually, I'm going to change religion a bit. So that would kind of be that aspect. What do you think?
Well, 100%. And, we can always wrestle with like who the people in the New Testament were that Jesus was naming. But like, for example, who are the Israelites? Who are the Jews? Everyone likes to claim this identity. But again, I'm always with the evidence. What can we see? What is evident? You know, what can a smart person deduce from the evidence? Sadducees and Pharisees. I don't need to see the genetics on that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to see the linguistic links on what a Sadducee or a Pharisee is. If you're doing money changing, if you're committing blood sacrifice, those are the clear markers of Sadducees and the Pharisees. So even if they died out, as they claim, the Sadducees, they say, are died out, extinct. The Pharisees, the modern Jews of today, claim themselves to be the Pharisees. I don't need to see a genetic test. You know, they might be lying. They might have no clue. But if they're acting, if it, if it looks like shit, smells like shit, tastes like shit, it's shit. So I don't need to see the genetic test. And to me, the righteousness will decide the opposite of that too. If you're upholding the right side, you don't need to be the chosen.
Be right back.
You don't need to be the Jesus actually he voided most of those concepts of a chosen people. And
So where do you find you? Oh, sorry, I thought you were starting.
That's all right.
I was just going to say, where do you find yourself lying politically then? Because from what, sorry if that is a question you'd hate to answer, but from what I would gather talking to you, I get this idea that you're quite anti-capitalist and anti kind of current establishment. But that was just maybe from what you were talking about there. No,
red till I'm dead. I'm a full-blown Trump tard. Full-blown Zion Dawn till the end. Operation Team Warp Speed 100%. Not even joking. I love Donald Trump. I am like just a classic Republican, you could say. I run a spiritual bookstore with my brother here, like new age metaphysical stuff, but some people come in and they're like, you're not spiritual. You're not like flowery and flower power stuff. But I'm all about the Christianity and just virtue. So right now it's clearly I'm aligned with the right politically in America is upholding family values and Western tradition and good architecture and things like that.
It's just traditionally the anarchist known as Jesus wasn't too fond of the establishment.
Well, there's nothing wrong with capitalist is a communist slander. It's actually pronounced free market. And I know you Brits don't know the first thing about just kidding. I'm only teasing. But
I was going to say, we invented tax havens, right?
You don't know the first thing about freedom, but no, I'm only teasing. That's whatever. But
I think Britain actually holds the record for the amount of countries that it's given independence days to. So we do have that.
You mean surrendered to with grace, right?
No, you have to own the place to then give them independence. So we had to win in the first place.
That's funny. If the Irish started peddling heroin, they'd be on top of the world too.
Just remember, when you're celebrating on July 4th, if we hadn't been a bit busy with the Dutch, that'd still be ours.
That's okay. The Spanish were there way before, and John Smith plagiarized almost all the Jamestown stories anyway. So they were the British were cannibalizing each other in England for decades, while the Spanish had a full blown.
Yeah, well, if to be fair, there's lots of stories, but you could also claim that the Leif Erikson group claimed America first, or you could go back to Maddox, and Maddox was around 500 AD, so it's the Welshes actually. But,
absolutely.
Just quickly going back to the political side, then, it's just, don't you think that with free market, so for example, just off the top of my head, don't you think usury being a sin, don't you think that in itself is already like encroaching on free market? And then before you answer, just ask, because I know that the Bible, especially if you look at like older sections of the Old Testament, like Leviticus, you find that a lot of it's not even religious, it's just telling you how to live your life. So a good example is when it's telling you if you have mucus, you know, or if you got phlegm, it's saying to stay inside and quarantine yourself, and don't. And if you touch someone that's coughing up phlegm, go and wash your hands and all that. It's literally just telling you how to not be, you know, a dirty person. So does the Bible not also contain societal and economic warnings? I mean, it definitely contains societal warnings. It's saying don't do this. If you guys start having sex too much, the city's going to burn down. Is a big part of, you know, the Bible at one point. So is there not that same warning there with things like usury? You know, why not to make profit on lending? Well, because eventually you'll collapse the banking system.
Right. Well, communists have borrowed more money than anyone in history. So,
Well, not only that, but the version of capitalism we have in the United States isn't pure. Just like any communism or anything else in the world, it all has this corrupted usury within it that doesn't allow it to actually be in its natural form. All of them are semi-corrupted and kind of in the center. If you're thinking about left, right, and center, almost everything is in the center economically because of this forced usury.
And you mentioned before the Essenes, about Jesus being, you know, an Essene. They were literally like, they would share everything. They if you had 2 shirts and your friend came in like, hey, I've not got a shirt, you'd give them a shirt. A lot of people suggest that's why Jesus was able to stay in all the places he did, because obviously he'd send his team ahead of him to go and find somebody that was part of the Essene sect, and they had to let him stay there and prepare food and everything because it was part of what they do. It was
Well, that's real communism. See, communism is like saying, it's like seeing the word yoga on a strip mall. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't equate to the perfection of the art. It's just the rebranding of a word or a title. Like the commune, hey, I'm more into communes than anybody. And that's how they sold communism, was saying, well, you know, you live in a place and you shouldn't have to charge each other for shared resources, and you live so close, and you know, you guys can just benefit from each other's labor. You know, the Bible does not necessarily steer us away from either. You're absolutely right that the Israelites in general were communist. Jews by nature, even to this day, are communist by nature, no matter how much money they're making in a capitalist system. You know what I mean? So like what Ben Shapiro says, everyone's a communist in the home. Once you close the doors, there's a shared workload that goes beyond your you know, role in society, right? So everyone's communist behind the home. And in fact, astrology teaches this too, is that it's communism. The moon is the same moon as the immune system. It's the moon. And the moon is how you are behind closed doors in the private life. And public, like republic, is the public life. And venerating the masculine in the external world, while venerating the feminine in the inner world, in the household. Mother is the master of the micro, you know, the inner domain, and the private domain, and father, the son, is the master of the public domain. His light is, you know, broad and you know, all it shines widely, right? So the public area is masculine, and there needs to be this kind of rigidity. But you know, the point about Jews being naturally communist behind closed doors, and even being proud of it, like Ben Shapiro, the capitalist of all capitalists, would say, has said, that's who I just quoted, is that they're communists behind closed doors in the family. So it's really just selling a lifestyle that belongs, that still coexists with capitalism. And by the way, in America, you know, we're a republic. So we're not necessarily a democracy, and we're not necessarily capitalist or even free market either, because there's big constraints on the market. We have the best functioning, you know, some would say that America's the most high functioning socialist country in the world, considering how effective our fire department is and things like that. But in our public school system, you know. So we're pretty dang socialist when it comes down to it. But as far as communist, I'm all about communes. If you have a village, keep it local, keep it, you know, under the table. Hey, my tomatoes for your lettuce. You know, I'm all for that. And that's where the communism, the spirit of communism belongs, is where there's a shared language, there's a shared goal, like local, you know, goal. I don't want to be working for the people in New York. You know what I mean? They don't share my lifestyle. So you'll notice socialism and even communism works best. It doesn't work, but it works best where there's a single ethnic group, homogenous society.
So you think that it would work with that kind of illusion of segregation?
No,
I mean, on
I
the
don't know.
like on a macro scale, you'd have that segregation, so it wouldn't really be an illusion. But on the you know, when you get to the looking at the planet as a whole and the entire economic system that's moving to you know, flowing it together as a system, at that point you say, well, you know, because look at the internet, for example. We could put up garden fences everywhere and tell the kids they're not allowed to play with the other kids, but they're still going to be able to chat to each other online. And I think that is the same that would happen with governments, you know? So, I mean, look at North Korea, South Korea. You've got North Koreans that would do anything. They'd risk crossing the border just to get hold of some American movies, you know? So you've kind of got this, I think something you've got to tackle that is just always going to be there is that people are going to eventually break down that wall, and you're going to have the east side of Germany running into the west, you know, and especially if one side of the wall has got different living circumstances, and that is definitely why we're seeing such like huge immigration problems at the moment. And I'd even argue that that's something that really benefits capitalism, because countries like Britain and America and lots of European countries, they just wouldn't have the size economies that they have if they didn't have constantly funneled in cheap labor to do the jobs nobody else wants to do.
Yeah, but you know, cheap labor doesn't make money for a country, believe it or not. It
No,
only
but
makes money for a
but
small few.
yeah, but as in it generates wealth, GDP, which is what people would use to say, well, we're the seventh richest country. So, for example, Britain, seventh richest country in the world. But if you actually look at the living standards of the average person, it's nowhere near. The biggest example of this, if you go to the City of London, I think the City of London is one of the richest cities in the world, if not the richest. It's got so much money funneled through it. It's got its own tax laws and everything. But next to it, literally down the road, you've got three of the poorest boroughs in Europe that they were literally listed by the European Union as being destitute. They were so poor. And these people were every day waking up and traveling into the city center to sell coffees and stuff to these bankers and businessmen. And you have this disparity. And that's in the seventh largest economy in the world. You've got rich bankers coming in from all over the world, Russian bankers, Swiss bankers, American bankers, and then the actual British population that are living there are destitute.
What does that mean?
And I think, to me, I think that means that I think society is going to break down because people are going to have enough of this stuff. Because I don't think humans can be trusted to run a system so complex without breaking down morally. I just don't think we have currently the capability. I think an awakening would need to take place where, as an entire species, we completely changed our mindsets. Because whilst it's very easy to be moral on a small scale, I don't think, like, it's a quote from Matt Damon in Interstellar. He says, you know, that very rarely extends beyond your own kind of eyesight or your own, beyond your own family. It's almost like that commune that you said about Ben Shapiro. That communism stops at the door. You get outside the door and suddenly you're a bit selfish.
Yes.
And yeah, same what you said about the segregation in societies, the homogenous groups. I shouldn't say segregation.
Well, Sweden does the best on quote unquote socialism. It's not even really, but they do the best with it, because when you walk out the door and you go from one end of the country to the next, literally everyone looks like family. And as long as that holds up, almost any system of governance will succeed or be maintained by the general good behavior of the people. And places where it's heterogeneous or mixed people from all over, you're gonna have chaos more and more. But communism is never the answer.
No,
And
I agree completely. Like, I don't have a political. Just to say, I know it seems like I've been fighting on the side of communism here, but I'm not at all a communist. My entire political point of view is what I would call kind of moralistic. I base it purely on how I feel it should be, and I take those morals from everyday things. My entire experience on this planet. So that is just the way I work it. I don't follow any political party. I always vote the way I want to vote based on how I'm feeling at the time.
right,
And
you like the Bible though, right? You consider yourself Christian-ish?
Yeah. I mean, I was atheist for quite a while. I was born, obviously, christened, so originally I was Christian, but when I got to an age where I questioned things, I didn't really believe in God, or I guess I did, because I kind of still prayed, but I was always very logical, and I thought, how could that even work? And it took quite a while for me to go through what I would call my religious awakening, or my personal faith journey, I guess, in which, like, I would say I married the two, and they came to terms with one another, and I started to see the world in a bit of a different way. And at that point, I became very Christian, but I take a broader view of things. I don't think that reading one specific doctrine, or one specific narrow point of view, is the way to do it. I think you should check out all religions and take every valuable lesson that you find and marry them all into one, and then that's what you should believe.
That's kind of the miracle of Christianity, though, because that's why the lifting of the prohibition of consuming the unclean animals, it's an allegory for being able to consume any type of religious doctrine while still maintaining your strong foundation in Christianity and being able to take what's valuable from those other sources without being corrupted and dying.
Yes. Speaking of moralism and the consumption of unclean animals, what's your position on vegetarianism? Because if we're getting to the root cause of all evil, forget the politics. I really think people can govern themselves through almost any system, as long as it's not too tyrannical. But going back to what almost every great genius philosopher there's ever been has said is, so long as there's slaughterhouses, man will never know world peace. Man will never know a clean, sinless existence, so long as there's that much blood on our hands. I tend to think that, and almost the religion game is like, it's finding out about the world and understanding. But if we want to eradicate death and violence, we can't keep consuming it. So almost everything else is arbitrary to me once I saw the truth behind vegetarianism.
So I take it you are a vegetarian. This is the moment you just pull out a chicken wing and go. But slaughterhouses, great point. I think the whole question that you asked about the moral side of it, I think, if I was to follow my morals, I should be a vegetarian. I definitely should be a vegetarian. I've battled the idea for a long time, but unfortunately, I'm quite a boring eater anyway. I think I'm more a lazy cook, but it's so much easier, especially as a dude who, has just come back from the gym, to just throw a few chicken breasts in an air fryer and throw a load of spices on them and just eat that with your bare hands as you watch TV, instead of, go to the effort of preparing something. When you start using lentils, you have to know what you're doing. So,
right. But let's
but
look
obviously,
Sorry, continue. Sorry.
No, go on. Ask away.
I was gonna say, but should we examine the cultures who have spent their time with lentils? Surely we find a more sophisticated people than the men who throw the the hunter gatherer can throw a chicken on a grill. And I'm with you. Like there's quick. I'm always in the mood for quick when I have a long day work or whatever. But there's always an option, and there's always a nutritional equivalent, if not a nutritional superior. So yeah, it's just
I think it's something a lot of people strive for, but it's just not very easy to do for whatever reason for a lot of people.
well, maybe
Yeah,
that's
'cause we're all hypocritical, aren't we? And I was literally just writing notes just in case I forgot to basically say I am a hypocrite, and this was the point I was making. And I'd say the exact same thing about what I was just talking about earlier with my views on certain aspects of morals to do with like capitalism and stuff. It's very easy for me to sit here and say that's terrible. You should pay people more, but then I still go and eat the cheap food. I still take part. And now, obviously, you can't just expect someone to not eat or not take part in society. Just don't breathe then if you don't like the pollution, kind of thing. But at the same time, I am actively participating. And it's the same with vegetarianism. I'm actively participating in eating the meat, even though I love the animals, and I'll cry if I watch the videos of the slaughterhouses. But again, I mean, those things tie in together, don't they? What is the main reason for the meat industry? It's the money. You know what I mean? That's realistically it.
well,
So
well, there is the adrenochrome spiritual side of it, which is if I wanted to rule over 7 billion people, would I feed them what the Greek philosophers were eating? Nah, I'd probably feed them what the people still living in the Stone Age are eating, which is meat,
yeah, possibly.
Costco rotisserie chicken and stuff like that.
We were kind of talking about
The
this the other
soul.
day with Taco Bell too, how they got rid of some of the vegetarian options, even though they have all of the ingredients still. It's like they don't want people to eat vegetarian. There's like 3 options there. Just like when you go to restaurants, it's hard to find an actual good vegetarian dish, especially in America.
Not always. I don't know. You guys can do a little better. It's not that hard. French fries, there's mediators. There's foods that everyone already eats a lot of.
But then you got to ask as well. Then what happens when we get to the point that we can lab grow meat, which is like round the corner scientifically?
Okay. Well, here. I don't want to make, and I hate to cut you off, but I'm very passionate about this stuff, and I'm very gung ho on some of these arguments because I encounter them a lot. So, what if I were to flip that back on you and say, okay, well, if the nutrition can be derived without the suffering of a real birthed animal, then can I clone living tissue for my pleasure from any animal for just not nutrition? Should I clone? This is horrendous, but should I clone a underage girl that's
not where I thought you were going to go with it.
I
was smiling, so I thought you were going to say something else, and then I was like, oh god.
Well, if it wasn't birthed and it doesn't have a real soul, is the sin absolved? If I'm eating flesh that bleeds, is it not the same flesh that any sin could be committed against?
Yeah, that's a very, very valuable point. But well, yeah, I mean, that goes so deep into it, doesn't it? You really could argue that. I mean, has God sat there himself with a human looking at it going, is it wrong to fuck it? I did make it. Because that's essentially where we're getting to. So yeah, it's a tough one. I don't know if you could compare lab-grown meat to the thing you mentioned, but
Right.
yeah, definitely. I get what you mean, though. The point you make is completely valid about the sin and it being the same meat. But what if there is no sin? What if you actually got the confirmation from the big man himself? Like he was down for the holidays, and he's like, oh, by the way, lab grown meat, it's all good. I heard Old World Florida needed some info on that.
Sure.
So
Yeah, well, that's a good one. And again, we can rest assured that the truth is in the Bible. The truth is in the stars too, but the truth is also written in the human body. What are we supposed to be eating? You can look at the human body, and even if God changes let's I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, or we'll grant the hypothetical scenario and say God does come down, and by chance he does say lab grown meat is okay to eat. Well, I could choose to follow that, but I'd also be admitting and embracing and reveling in the fact that every single deviation from the Garden of Eden was brought about solely by man's sin and his own transgression. God never commanded the first sacrifice of an animal. God never commanded the first slaying of the brothers, Cain and Abel, which is where we get the first definition of adrenochrome in the Bible. When the blood hit the ground, God heard the screams. He could taste the screams in the blood that had dripped into the earth. If that's not a definition of adrenochrome, I don't know what is. People say the first murderer was a vegetarian. Well, the first murder victim was a vegetarian, because it wasn't until the Noahide laws that you explicitly see the consumption of flesh. But anytime any meat eater or any flesh eater would point to any law, and there's many in Exodus, there's many in Leviticus, there's many, even Jesus himself in seemingly permits the consumption of flesh, or at least the sharing of a table, the sharing of a cafeteria with meat eaters. And it's all in the spirit of tolerance when it comes to Jesus. But anytime we're looking at a justification for the consumption of flesh in the Bible, we're also admitting and embracing the fact that we're partaking in a sinful, subsequent, non-factory setting, non-default transgression. The original factory settings laid out in Genesis are clear. They're explicit. They can't be misinterpreted. The Lord, good God, gave us herb and fruit-bearing seed, with no exception. And it was only man's sin, folly, transgression, you name it, that separated us from that and necessitated the further specifications that God brings about later. So any instance, New Testament or Old Testament, that someone would point to as a justification for eating meat, it's no more than the same justification for eating a dog, or cracking one of your enemies over the head and saying, well, they did it in Genesis. And even if it is justified, you're admitting and you're accepting that it's the transgression from the original factory settings, which cannot be corrupted or misinterpreted.
My one question would be, if the lab-grown meat is just, from what I've seen from the videos about it, it's usually like a piece of material. So is the adrenochrome present in that piece of material, or is
that's a good question, because the adrenochrome is the terror itself. Like when the animal's being slaughtered, it's terrified, even if it's had like a painkiller or anesthetic or something. It's still terrified, and there's still terror and fear hormones being pumped into the blood, namely adrenochrome, or adrenochrome. But there's other ones too. There's adrenolutin, something like that, which is another one. All mammals have this. So I get messages all the time when people hear me speak about vegetarianism, and they say, Dr. Longo, you're so dumb. Adrenochrome only comes from little babies, human babies. Don't you know that? No, it comes from all animals, full-sized, adult, grown, deer, cow, cattle. They all have it. Now, fish probably don't have it, which is why Jesus is a little bit more permissive about fish. It's meeting Jesus being a radical Essenian, Neoplatonist, Pythagorean. He's meeting people halfway. He's literally meeting human sacrificers halfway and saying, well, can you meet me halfway? And we can sit down for fish at least. I know you guys are so barbaric that you'll eat anything with eyes, but let's at least meet halfway with fish. You got those phytonutrients and the plankton and all that stuff. It's better for you in the long run. Raw fish will get all these parasites, but It's the age of Pisces too. That's always the ultimate trapdoor escape route too, is to just say, well, Jesus represented fish. So even the instances of sharing fish and eating fish once after he resurrected are merely symbolic. But even if we say that it was real fish, and all those things can be upheld today. So just like we're going to complain about money changers and blood sacrificers, well, we can all take a step towards Essenian righteousness. And Jesus was not a full Essene. He was so radical, and we remember him and his teachings because he deviated from the Essenes. He was not as radical in certain areas, but he was totally heretical to them in other areas. He was reaching out to the Gentiles. Not just
You mentioned the
Jews.
fish, which I found really interesting with the Jesus eating the fish. Although I did think there is a very big chance that Jesus had just tried calamari one time and was like, oh, that's so good. It's actually so good. I said I wasn't going to eat fish, but go on then. It's the tomato dip that does it. But you brought up before about the dead, and it reminded me of Gospel of Thomas, the one they found with the Dead Sea Scrolls. And there's a bit where Thomas says supposedly Jesus said, when you ate what was dead, you were dead, essentially. And then obviously, what do you define as dead? Because I guess plants are living. But I felt that it was talking very specifically about that. And it talks again about the lion saying, if you consume the lion, you become like it, basically an animal. Whereas if the lion consumes man, it becomes man. And it's one of these things that you can take what you want from it. But it did feel very like it was talking about this kind of vegetarian lifestyle, especially when you couple it with in Revelations, when they talk about the time of the lion laying with the lamb and everything eating grass. Now it's very specific that in Jesus's perfect world, the animals aren't killing each other anymore. So it's not too much of a leap to assume that Jesus was forbidding hunting in this place. You know what I mean? He'd be a bit pissed, wouldn't he, if he turned around like, hey, look at all the sheep. Oh God, what are you doing? He's just gone through all the effort to train the sheep and the lions to not do that, and then the humans come along and set up a slaughterhouse on the first day in heaven. But it's one of those, isn't it?
To me, when they say things like if you eat what is dead, you are dead, it's more talking about the consumption of certain dogma, certain religious principles from other. Because you have to think about what was taking place during the time period that this stuff is being written. There were different sects of different types of interpretations of the scripture, which are all labeled usually by different animals. They would wear certain labels if they were part of this group or that group. Their interpretation of the scripture was basically what caused that. So when they're saying you eat something that's dead, a dead person in that context is someone who doesn't have the belief, someone whose dogma is, I guess, just like not a spiritual interpretation, something that would cause you to lose faith.
Yes.
That's bad.
Well, Shem, you've accessed the symbolic, but we haven't discarded the literal. Or let's make sure we're not discarding the literal.
No, I agree with you, because I mean,
mean?
Even in the book of Daniel, we talked about this before. In the book of Daniel, when they go to serve King Zarathustra or whatever his name is, I forget which king it is, but some sort of Persian king, they have an agreement where he's like, hey, let us not eat meat for the next week or 3 weeks or whatever it is, just to show that we'll be just as healthy as the people you're forcing to eat meat. So they're specifically talking about not eating animals in that situation and being vegetarian. So I agree that there are cases like that, but I acknowledge the literal aspect as well, and which is why earlier I was saying it's best to be vegetarian. It's just it's very difficult for whatever reason.
It's not that difficult. Get rid of your parasites, then it'll be difficult to eat fucking bloody carcasses.
Yeah, I went a week last, what was it, last week? I went a week and then I failed miserably. But
humans don't crave flesh or gore or the irony taste of unseasoned blood. They detest these things. Liver King's a fraud. Paul Saladino's a fraud. That's adrenochrome stuff. But even if we're talking about lab meat, I mean, it's still blood, and the human skeleton is completely opposed to predatory animals. It's
I would be
we're
fascinated to see
so
if the actual.
frugivorous.
I would be fascinated to see a study with the lab-grown meat if the cells, the individual cells, do create that sort of adrenochrome when they know that that created
They
living
probably
organism is
would.
dying.
Yeah,
That would
all
be
flesh
amazing.
is intelligent. So I don't know. But yeah, I'm
I'm
not
not gonna eat it
comforted in
though.
the
I would never eat
slightest.
lab-grown meat,
Exactly.
but I'm just saying I'm curious about it.
No, that's all the coffee, all the Starbucks vegetarians, all the Starbucks vegans are going to jump for the lab meat as soon as it comes out and it's readily accessible. All the plant-based PSYOP loser, green initiative, ego friendly people, they're going to take the lab meat right up the ass. Totally 100%. They're going to sign up for it. They're going to have the lab meat tacos and the lab meat Burger King. And oh, yeah, it'll be vegan. It'll be like, oh, this is suffering free or cruelty free. That's why you got to do away with the emotional vegetarianism. You've got to look at your body and say, I don't want prostate cancer. I don't want heart disease. I don't want all of these red meat parasite cancerous diseases that are purely from corpse eating. I mean, vegetarians are way healthier. You've got some radical vegans who are emotional about it and miss out on a ton of nutrients because they're too picky about stuff. There's totally horror cases with people being Starbucks vegans and saying, "Oh, it ruined my life," and then switching and stuff like this. But all the
Starbucks
vegetarians I know are healthy as can be. The oldest person, like youngest looking oldest person I know, is a vegetarian, borderline raw vegan. And yeah, Florida is a haven for young vegetarian hippies who are not left wing, emotional, blue hair loser, Starbucks vegans, the fake plant-based factory plant, industrial plant-based. That's the Bill Gates agenda. Lab meat and impossible meat go hand in hand. Real vegetarians don't claim any of that garbage. Let's eat with what Pythagoras, Plato, all those guys were eating, right? Nikola Tesla was a vegetarian. Da Vinci was a vegetarian. So the mind will perform even better on a vegetarian diet.
How many of
Maybe,
your audience do you think are vegetarians with you, by the way?
I don't know, the ones who come and visit me in the store, I'd say it's like a third.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should get people to drop a comment down so we can try and gauge it. How many are vegetarian? How many of you have considered it since watching Dr. Longo talk?
I know
Because I mean, you're definitely making me consider it. I mean, I always do, like I say, but I then look at the fridge and I'm like, well, I've got to eat the ribs, and then it just kind of goes from there.
1.2 billion pigs killed in America per year, or something like that.
Yeah, it's a Holocaust every day.
It is literally, yeah. That's one of the sickest things about it is, the extents that it goes to. And obviously, we all have an idea of what a slaughterhouse looks like. We've all seen, the odd video of some cattle probably getting herded onto the back of a farm truck before, being driven off. But the actual extent of these next level setups, it is something you until you properly go and look for it, because they don't want you to see it, obviously. And yeah, it shocked me to
It's not only that, but
realize.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
I was gonna say it's not only that, but the restriction that animals are put under in our modern world is it's unbelievably bad. Last night I had a nightmare where it doesn't sound like a nightmare, but it was to me. Like I was driving in a car, I looked to the right, and all these horses had escaped, and they were running down the highway, like just running full speed, to like grasping at freedom. I'm just thinking, and I was like telling people in the car with me in the dream, like, it sucks that all these horses are probably going to be killed or shot down when all they literally want is to just be out living their natural lives. I mean, think about, on top of being slaughtered, all the confinement put on all these animals to live in certain areas, if they even have that, just trying to survive in the modern world. It's multi-level. I mean, it ties back into pretty much what we're talking about with the politics and the different types of economies earlier. It's like we all live under the illusion of these different communism, capitalism, but to me, I view it as an illusion. I think that we can see the same theme in all of these different societies, that there's a certain group on top who seems to be putting these same types of things in every society. Who that is, who knows?
Well,
But
yeah,
they
it's
definitely are the people. They're probably associated with whoever's saying, "Hey, this is the 7th ranked GDP country." So whoever's coming up with
yeah,
those.
yeah. I mean, we all know who the enemy are. It's like it's the same group, the same echelon of the top elite people that have such a control over every aspect of everything. I mean, when you boil down to it, how many families control everything? How many families control the media? Isn't it something like 3 control a huge percentage of the media, like 3 literal families?
Do you think do you think those people follow a certain mythology or religious practices? Not.
I mean,
Yes.
I don't personally know. Like, I don't think it's out of the realms of feasibility. Like, obviously, you're more into this side of things, so I guess you'll know more about it. But like, to me, the idea of these secret societies that go so deep. I know we have the videos of them doing these stupid rituals at groups like that. So yeah, don't get me wrong. I know that kind of thing exists. But I don't know how deep it goes. I don't know how many people get invited to the sacrificial rituals before the whole world ends up at a sacrificial ritual. There has to be a cutoff point, doesn't it?
It seems
So
like it.
I would struggle to put a line on where that cutoff point is, because obviously if you've got people that are going to wherever George Bush goes to university and joining a secret Sigma group there or whatever and doing sacrifices or fake adrenochrome stuff, that's surely going to get out, isn't it? Like that video of the what event was it? I can't
I
think.
don't know. You ever met someone who went? You ever met
Go
someone
on.
who went to a fraternity, college
No,
fraternity?
we don't really have the same thing over here. I mean, we do, but they're not as commonplace, I think.
Right.
That you-
So the shit. What were we just talking about? I forgot.
Secret society,
Fraternity.
fraternity, the lunar society, kind of like what you follow with your meetups.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. We're the mystery
I'm just
cult.
joking.
Well, the original mystery schools were all vegetarian, and you can kind of look to when they were corrupted, when they stopped using vegetarianism and astrological literacy as entry barriers. Once they just started letting everyone in, that's when you have the Masons, and Templars and stuff apparently being corrupted. But in Jesus's times, in Plato's times, those were all vegetarian institutions, just like the Hindus are. The Hindu temples would say they don't serve meat; they serve lentils, they serve chickpeas and things like that, rice and
So
great curry dishes that are delicious, nutritious.
do either of you entertain the idea that at one point it was hereditary and then it became more of like an initiated thing that almost anyone could join, if they have certain tests set up to kind of find out if you're able to join this or not, which comes down to the argument between the high priest and the rabbi almost.
It doesn't matter.
Well, it kind of
If
does.
things
It ties back into the mythology that you're talking about, coming from Helsinki and then spreading out, or the Etruscans. Like they all seem to have these same symbols, these same beliefs that are transferred with slight differences over time. So that's what I was wondering.
Well, everyone's looking at the same stars, but anytime you're talking about ancient religion or old world religion, it's all fertility worship. So when they stopped using white magic and when they stopped caring about vegetarianism, the world went to corpse eating and black magic. So vegetarians typically can't stomach black magic. They're usually white magicians. Whereas corpse eaters have no inhibitions about anything. They're depraved and they will engage in almost any type of magical act. Because even Aleister Crowley, the worst of the worst, advised against the sacrifice of animals because it was futile. It did nothing. It was indiscriminate. It was a caveman's bargaining with a sky god. he knew that plant-derived incense was far more persuasive. Its influence is subtle and pleasing. And remember, it's not the carnage that God liked. It was the smell. It was the smell of burnt carcasses, that, you know, the crisping of bacon from afar that God, you know, smelt and had. And maybe they were just using the fats as a vehicle, as a medium for other plants and herbs and spices, because incense has always been the focal point of ritual, you know.
It makes me
Communal.
it makes
Yeah.
me laugh sometimes when I'm reading the Bible, because it does make me think it's like some guy who just likes a certain type of food and he gets pissed off when they cook the wrong food. He's like, no, that's not what I want. That's not the smell I like. Come on.
You just got autism.
Yeah, it's like
we don't do that on Tuesdays. It's fish on Tuesdays. You know the
It's like-
rules.
Yeah.
I didn't-
Well, when Noah got off the ark, they didn't have gardens of lavender and you know, bushels of sage and all these frankincense and myrrh waiting for them. Those things would have been very precious, and if they had any at all, they would have been stored in very finite. Well, they had a lot of animals, and animals will reproduce probably a little faster than a whole garden will. Things like that. So the fat that they had was the fat that they used, and they didn't have gallons of olive oil like God does officially call for in Exodus, when he says, when you're burning your Lord's holy incense and holy anointing oil, the base was olive oil. There was no animal product in the Lord's sacred incense and the holy anointing oil.
based on what you're saying, it kind of seems like the dove bringing back the olive branch is almost like a hopeful way of returning to no longer needing to sacrifice animals and use the fat.
That's a good way to look at it. I would agree, but I would be pressed for, you know, evidence on that. But that's a very ideal interpretation for me.
Just going off my own feelings, whenever I read in the Bible of them sacrificing an animal, I was just shaking my head like, doesn't want that.
Well, you'll notice
Because,
the first instance of apparently sacrifice was Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel, there was the offering, the first of the flock. And people, that's another one that low IQ, you know, corpse eating apologists will use is, well, God wasn't pleased with the offering of fruits and veggies that Cain made. Abel had the first of his flock, and God was pleased. Well, you'll notice there's no instance of slaughter right there. It just says the fats of the first of his flock. Well, fat can be ghee or butter. And it's also known, it's more efficient to use the fat derived from the lactation of the animal, rather than slaughtering the whole animal itself for, you know, a fleeting amount of resources. The cow, goat, whatever you're milking will live forever. Or not forever, but for a long time. You can milk it on and on and on. And you'll notice that there's no explicit death or slaughter in that instance of sacrifice. And then when Noah lands a little bit later on, right there, you'll see that God did not command a sacrifice. God did not command a sacrifice. They stumbled off the ark and they almost didn't know what to do. And they just slaughtered an animal, and it's kind of implied that they created this blood debt, that by opening up this account, this karmic checking account, does that make sense? Or this like credit card, karmically speaking, that they opened up by slaughtering this animal, never ever got paid in due. And this is why Jesus always identifies blood sacrifice with usury, hand in hand. Shambles. Research the word shambles. Everybody out there who would seek to justify the consumption of flesh or the ritualistic slaughter of animals is also justifying, in the same breath, is justifying money changing. Because in the Bible, in Jesus' eyes, these were one and the same. It was the shambles. This is a shambles. The stool, the money changer's stool, or the money changer's table is known as a shambles. But it also has the meaning of the slaughterhouse. If something's in shambles, that means like you walked into a room and there's body parts all over the place. Like they were hacking up carcasses, right? And in Jesus' day, the money changers were the slaughterhouse owners. The money changers were the corpse peddlers. We're still eating goyslop 2,000 years later. Jesus tried to put an end to it. He largely did. He woke up millions of people. And, Krishna too in India, same deal, vegetarian. You worship, half of the worship is being vegetarian. Half of the worship is not having corpse demons, animating your body. And whatever.
I don't know. I think just taking it, most of the stuff that gives permissions for eating meat in an allegory kind of gives more weight to what you're saying, because some of the more straightforward passages that talk about eating a meat seem to refer to being a vegetarian, but these other passages are very easily put into an allegorical sense to describe something else. And you don't always find that in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean,
just to quickly come back to Old World Order, as because I had some notes earlier to talk about that, and we just completely forgot to anyway. But I noticed in that they talk a lot about the Antiquitech. Now that's something I've never personally made any videos on the Antiquitech side of things. Obviously, I know a small bit about it. My friends are more into that side of it than me. I've obviously been more historical kind of documents person. But one thing I kind of noticed from that is this idea again of free energy technology being taken, locked away by a different class or a different race of people. Sometimes, especially people that believe that there's stuff further beyond the ice wall, and that there's a higher race of beings that are stopping us going beyond. And I guess I find it quite ironic, and there's kind of an antithesis here between the people that, on the one hand, are talking about this society that was all free energy based. Look at the amazing architecture, everyone loved each other and stuff. And then those same people immediately, like you say, go and say, "Oh, but I am a free market capitalist, and and I believe in all that stuff." So, don't you think that those two things are kind of like
No.
they're two different.
No, they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, well,
They're
not, but at the same time, do you not think that there's something that makes you question, like, what do I really want from this? Because I liked specifically in that video, I didn't like much of Old World Order, but I did like listening to you talking about the kind of possible utopian society that was there, because when you're bigging it up in the show, it's like it's obviously something we all want to be a part of. Yet
so, yeah.
it's something that I wouldn't say fits in with capitalism, because obviously somebody's going to take away your free energy machine.
What are you, an
Not
Antifa?
not necessary capitalism, but
but
you know what I mean.
capitalism doesn't.
What's so offensive about capitalism? Because
It's not the it's not the offense. Just to quickly answer, I'm not offended by capitalism. The idea is that it's a simple thing of, like you say, money changing, right? It's as simple as trading, right? Trading goes beyond trading. It's when trading becomes its own thing. Money is supposed to be a tool just to facilitate the easy trade of goods, and the minute that it goes beyond that and becomes something like it is today, which is a resource in itself, then it can ruin societies. And I think that
you're missing the point, though. In a true free capitalistic society, there's no monopoly, there's no exclusivity. So when someone comes up with an invention, I can come up with the same exact invention without some idiot having a patent on it, and I can sell it for cheaper. That's true capitalism. We don't have that in America. We don't have that.
Y-
We might have it in other places on the planet, but it's
But
definitely in
that's
America.
a very specific example of free market capitalism.
It's not though, because you're talking about free energy and providing energy to people. So the idea behind it is if some idiot wants to create energy and charge a bunch of money for it, I can come up with the same exact invention in a free capitalist society and charge less for it,
Yeah,
causing that
yeah,
guy
yeah.
to have to put his
But
prices down. You see
but
what I'm
if you
saying?
were to, yeah, but if you were to, in a capitalist society, invent something that destroyed capitalism, like, so if,
Right.
right, if you're selling energy and then I
I don't
make
know.
the energy machine, right? Okay, and then obviously you go into the moral side of it, like selling, right? Is based on what supply and demand. So to sell something, you know somebody needs it. So at what point do you gauge profit over like morals? If you have a chart here of
Profit as
It
morals
doesn't.
to
yeah,
profit,
profit doesn't
what
plot. It doesn't plot on the chart. You can make as much money as you can in the world. It doesn't say anything about whether you'll enter the kingdom of heaven. It doesn't
well,
say
I
anything
mean,
about whether you're a
it
good
does
person.
say that a rich man will never get into heaven. It says a
No, no, no,
camel
no.
has
It is
more chance of
harder.
passing through an eye of a
Yes.
needle.
Doesn't say never. It says hard.
Well, yeah, more chance of a camel passing through an object it cannot pass through.
Right.
So
And rich, by the way, rich actually has more to do. And I'm not saying like rich is like, oh, well, we're all rich because we have good attitudes. But rich literally means having an attitude of wealth. Being rich, like too sweet or too dense or too too overly seasoned or maybe even
Rich.
reveling in what you have. Being rich. Are you being rich with me? You know what I mean?
And
Don't
also in the
get rich with me. Things like
context of
that.
the Bible, the poor and the rich are people who are they're full of
Yes.
information. They're full of
Yes. Well, that's the
dogmatic.
easy way out, Shem. That's the easy
No,
way
I'm
out
not.
is
I'm
to
just
say allegory. But you're
no.
right.
I'm not
And
saying it's
he's
an
right too.
allegory,
Yeah.
but it's like it's emphasized in multiple texts. It's for sure like an actual thing they're talking about. Like that's an actual translation of rich is just
but
it
I'd
actually
also
is
say
real.
it's specific as well. Like we're talking can be both metaphorical and quite literal. But the
Yes.
specifics of it would be that there's specific scenes where God says that people that go back for their things, there's lots of references to this, that people that try and go back for their stuff will get lost. Right. I think one example is when the wife turns back and he says, don't look at the burning city, and she turns and she turns to stone. That kind of, and the same thing is said about Revelations. It says people should take off their clothes, put them on the floor beneath them, or go up to their roofs or whatever. Wait there, leave your stuff. Basically, don't go back down into the house to get your things. And I think it ties in with this idea of being rich, because people, again, in Revelation, it talks about who fights God when God turns up. Who are the people that don't want God to do his bit? It's the rich and the kings, like basically the corrupt and the kings, the people that are like,
Right.
God's here. God's going to take our toys away because he told us not to do this last time, remember?
Right.
And
But
that's
with all due respect, capitalism are any of these fears or struggles unique to capitalism? Absolutely not. There's communism. There's other, fringe systems that have been tried out otherwhere. See, this is my whole thing. This is my whole thing. There's astrology. There's the 7 chakras. There's the 7 planets in the sky. I always debate with people, is there inherent sin? Are people born evil? And I always say, if we were to take a child and raise them in a controlled environment, they'll never even have heard of capitalist or communist or whatever. We'll just give them the bare necessities for life and proper development, proper athletic, expenditure, all this stuff. They're just going to be able to live free from all sinful influence. Let's just say 1984 hit it out of the park in a perfect way. You raise a potentially sin-free child with no negative influence, right? Let's just say, I know this is a ridiculous scenario, but bear with me. If we spare this one child, or however many, 5 children, whatever, and you say they're never going to have any sinful trauma or exposure to anything negative, to me, you're still going to deal with the same 7 virtues and sins in that one person or 5 people, 10 people in this closed system, this experiment, this petri dish, where everyone's free from exposure to sin. The same sin would arise from inside of every individual. There's always the same virtues and sins, virtues and vices. So no matter what the system is, there's going to be greed. No matter what country it is, it doesn't matter who we kill, elect, or whatever, there's always going to be the same 7 influences within man that come to the surface, just the same way that the toddler is not morally plotted on a chart. You can't plot a toddler's actions morally because he's greedy by nature. Mine, 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 mine. You quite literally need to teach the importance of sharing. Likewise, and such are people likened to sheep and children over and over again in the Bible. So you can't just say, aha, we found the perfect government. Society is going to be good forever now. I understand it's an honest, pursuit, but it's kind of a fool's game to try and chase down it's a fool's game to lay any blame on anything other than the same 7 vices and virtues that you and I and Shem and Stalin and everybody all suffer from.
Well, I mean, you brought up a good point there about the toddler and the emotional responsibility, because then you could ask at what age are we on spiritual development? Are we still toddlers in our emotional responsibility on the spiritual scale? Are we as a species forgiven for our transgressions because we don't know any better? Are we currently learning? And then I think the main tackling point of the capitalism, from my point of view, is well, it's not just capitalism. It's not as simple as governments, like you said, right? It isn't.
Okay, all right. You must have been molested by a capitalist or something. What was the?
Well, it was actually a pastor, but
No, sorry, I'm only teasing.
No. I'm
All right.
You see, the world has a finite amount of resources, and that's a fact. We have a finite amount of resources, and
Okay.
well,
I'll mute.
If we tried, we could drink all the water. That's a fact. It'd take a while, but we could do it. And this is the idea that at some point in the future, there'll genuinely be a point when humans would probably have to face the idea of, we're running out of water. At the moment, we already know that we can't supply the amount of animals, for example, without turning the entire planet into almost a Holocaust camp for cows. So what we have to then do to make that that supply chain still there is these kind of crimes, like killing, in your eyes, the crimes of killing cows, killing animals, these kind of Holocaust things. And then it's not just that, because that extends to other aspects of life, because then you could talk about usury and banking, you could go into gambling. What kind of effects are these things having on people? Do we care because it's making us money right now? And that's the problem, is that it's not about the capitalism itself. It's just that we have a world right now where everybody's only way of living a good life is to get this thing called money. So your entire job is to make money just so that you can live, and that's not selfish in itself, because you've probably got a wife and kids, etc.
Replace capitalism with corpse eating and replace money with protein, and now we're having an interesting conversation.
Well, you replace it because it's a perfect metaphor. I think the thing is if let's look at it. The planet is an ecosystem, and you could say maybe it's a living thing, right? And we might be milking the planet, and if you treat it well, then you've got enough stuff, but you can't overdo it. And what we're doing at the moment is we've created corporations, right? Corporations it's like if a sin could grow into its own being, because
not always.
Well, it can be, but most corporations, the people in those corporations would never do evil things, but the corporations themselves, most of them, have done some really terrible things. I'm looking at
But
Coca-Cola's Colombian death squads.
Isn't it entirely the opposite though? The corporation has done nothing, and it was clearly at the hands of people that any evil was done.
Well, yeah, of course, but this is the point. The combination of a load of people in a room that then get their emotional responsibility removed. They're literally just no emotional responsibility for you anymore. Just, just do your job.
Right.
We've heard that
Well,
one before.
But we
And
have
then
all the solutions. With all due respect, we have the solutions to so many of these issues. They're some of the most eternal things that philosophers have been wrestling with. And by the way, if we ditch the globe model, we're actually not really in a dire situation with finite resources. As far as I'm concerned, water's infinite, petroleum's infinite. If it weren't for the Standard Oil Corporation bringing petroleum to America and the rest of the world, we'd still be harvesting whales at a Holocaust rate. Whales live 300 years, if not more, some of them. We haven't even come close to recovering from the mass whale die-off that John D. Rockefeller and his big evil corporation saved us from. They spared the whales.
Even if you want to say that water,
there's always God's will,
right.
though. It's always God's will behind this
Yeah,
evil
maybe,
act.
but I mean,
that's in the Bible too.
Well,
Any
I would
perceived evil
I
act
would put it
is-
to you then that God's will in this circumstance, from my point of view, is he's trying to teach us a lesson about exactly what I'm saying. So he's going to put us through the hardships, and then at the end, he's going to go, see, next time, what are you not going to do? And we're going to go, we're not going to do capitalism. Exactly. But
I don't
the
know.
point is,
Luke, from your point of view, does that mean that there needs to be like a maximum population or something if you think there's finite resources? Because
well, not necessarily, because the thing is we have to start tackling things as a species more than anything. At the moment, we have a huge problem, which is if anything happens, our governments would lie to us and then try and do it the most cost-effective way. They'd all try and get rich off the middle. I mean, look at COVID, right? COVID, they didn't. Let's say, I mean, no matter what your views on COVID are, let's hypothetically say it was a legitimate illness. People still went in and profiteered. People still went in and tried to make as much money as possible. They were doing middle deals. For Britain, for example, there was a dude that made something like 70 million brokering a deal for face masks from China that turned out to not be real. It turned out to not work. So, go on, what would you say?
Are we making the mistake of identifying capitalism with just the same greed that would pop up in every system? I mean, why make a boogeyman out of capitalism?
Yeah.
It just sounds like
the point is, because the point is that your house is currently on fire. The capitalism is representing the house on fire. You're saying, well, it's not the capitalism's fault. It's the people. It's the greedy people. But yeah, it's like saying we've got a murder house. It's not the murder house's fault that people keep getting murdered in the murder house. It's the killers. But well, maybe we shouldn't have a murder house. Like, no, we've got to leave the murder house because people have to have the choice to go in the murder house or not. Otherwise, it's not fair.
So in your hold on. In your mind, is capitalism is monopolizing things a part of capitalism, or is capitalism something separate from monopolies?
Capitalism is basically something that's popped up in the 1700s as a result of these growing companies, these companies that are going all around the world. So essentially what happens is it used to be kings and queens that owned all this stuff. Then obviously banks start getting involved. People start coming up with great ideas to make loads of money. And eventually the bankers start realizing that the kings and queens are now in their way. And it's the opposite. It used to be the kings and queens that owned everything, and now it's the rich and the elites. So they start making sure that the people who get into power are the ones that do what the bankers want. When you have a king that wants to take all the money and go partying, they get rid of him and replace him with a king that's going to be happy and is going to let them keep doing their thing. And this system just kept growing and growing, right? So then people behind borders, they start talking and they go, hey, Phil, I heard your new king's a bit of a dick and he doesn't like banks. And they go, yeah, he's a right one. Well, should we maybe sort him out? Yeah, let's do that. And there's your birth of your secret societies, because suddenly these rich people are actually talking behind borders and going, yeah, we can't have him in power. We can't have him in power. And we're 300 years or down the line of this.
So is that part of the actual theory of capitalism, or is that something separate?
Well, I mean, it's definitely not the theory of capitalism. I don't think someone came up with the...
So would you agree that capitalism without this aspect of it works? is the whole point here.
Well, no, no, it still definitely doesn't work, right? You can go to any economist, a top economist, right, and actually ask them if capitalism is a pyramid scheme, and if they know what they're talking about, they'll say yes. Why is it a pyramid scheme? Because it relies on a constant source of growth. So it isn't just well, obviously you said about infinite before, and I was going to bring up that point and say let's hypothetically agree that the water's infinite, the petroleum is infinite. Let's say that, right? Even if we agreed that, we must still agree that the land is not infinite. I mean, unless God comes up with something to give us more land. But I'm not saying it won't happen. But the land is always going to be infinite.
Right.
So you have this problem with corporations where they can buy lots of things. So, you know, a simple example on the tiny scale for us is if you're starting a business up and, you know, I sell my oranges on the street, or I have my lemonade stand and I make a load of money, and now I can invest more money in more lemons. And now I've got even more lemons, now more lemonade, more money, more lemons, more lemonade, keep going. But the problem is eventually I will have all the lemons in the world. And I know that as a single individual lemon seller, that's ridiculous. But when there is billions of lemon sellers, and we've joined a corporation called lemonsellers.com, and we own all the lemons, we sell the lemons, and eventually we go, oh shit, there's no lemons left. Right? Normal everyday people can't get hold of lemons. They can't make lemons on the street anymore. You know, you have to have a license to have lemon sellers because you just can't do it anymore. And that's what's going to happen. You want a good example? McDonald's. It started as a family restaurant. It's now one of the world's biggest retail companies because they realized, like, oh my God, we own all this land. We should just own more land.
But how about this?
Yeah.
Aren't they just feeding a supply? You know, and also, I hate to bring it back to the same thing, but if there weren't the gluttony for McDonald's, they would have stayed the little family business. If there weren't the gluttony driving the greed, you know. So again, it's just kind of like, why make a boogeyman out of capitalism?
Well, I mean,
I think it's
even corporations. We're always consenting.
It's
We're always
great point. Well, it's a great point because there's a brilliant movie called The Founder, which talks about the. You've probably seen it. It's got Keaton in it, you know, and he plays Ray Kroc, the guy that steals McDonald's from the McDonald's brothers. The McDonald's brothers who started McDonald's, they started it with these like proper love for their business model. They really loved the speedy system. They really wanted to produce fast burgers for good, and they loved like the clean store, the families coming. These guys cared. Now that's something I'm on board with. Like that's brilliant. That is individual.
Can you pause right there though? Can you pause and just acknowledge that is capitalism at that point? That is the capitalism.
Right. They got there.
It's not though, because the thing is you kind of like confusing capitalism, right, with restaurants, because restaurants have existed for thousands of years.
Well,
right? Capitalism is big.
With greed that's existed for thousands of years.
Well, no. Capitalism is. No, that's the point. Capitalism is when people got to a point where they were beyond borders and they could make things that were essentially their own entities. They survived on their own from now, and they weren't, you know, because think about it, a company, you replace the CEO, the company keeps living, right? So you talked before about the company having no sin. What we've actually done is created a monster. Right, we've created a monster that has no emotions, but its only goal is to perform one sin. Is to be gluttonous, it's to be greedy, right? So we've created a greed machine with no emotional responsibility and nobody to say sorry to. God would be livid. He'd be like, guys, what are you doing?
Just based on what you're saying, it's pretty clear that I don't think any of us really disagree on much. So I'm not sure where you're getting the idea that we do about capitalism, because you're blaming the same things that we're blaming at the end of the day. So unless,
100%. I'm not arguing with you. I'm trying to show you that we're on the same side. I'm trying to show you that the problem is that we do have. I mean, again, maybe things are infinite, but let's just maybe hypothetically accept that they're not, and we need to start approaching society from a point of view of people that understand that and need to stop profiteering, stop being greedy, just start actually being fair about things. And I think the way things are running, we're not going to change, because these billionaires, the same people in control of this system, they spend a lot of money to make sure you never think what I'm telling you right now. They spend so much money to make sure that you never get together and actually go, huh? Yeah,
It's not
Whatever. Here,
I guess
if you
what's
if you ditch the globe and you ditch the meat, the future does look a bit brighter. The horizon just looks a bit, closer, I guess. And the doom and the gloom, well, what university did you go to?
me.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't. It's called Cheadle Marple. There's college, but yeah,
You went to a college. Where did you major in?
I did history.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But whatever. I forgot what we're talking about.
let's enter the last arc of this conversation. Let's move on from
Yeah,
the capitalism
definitely.
talk. Luke,
But-
can you give us like a brief breakdown on some of the stuff that you discovered in your last video about like the Tartarian video and all of your documentary?
Well, that last documentary was absolutely massive, wasn't it? It was a compilation of a load of my videos that I just put together. I think the last proper topic I did was at the Seven Palaces. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I did something after, but that my main area that I did, if that is the best thing to talk about, I guess, for people that might be interested. I started with the British stuff. Obviously, Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett were some of my original inspirations back when I was about 15, 16, many moons ago now. And then I got back into it, started researching this stuff, and I always intended to be more into the British, but inadvertently got drawn into Tartaria. And like you mentioned at the beginning of the stream, I focused on it as an actual place, a country, where it was on the maps, its kind of history, how it derives from the Mongols, and was there some kind of truth to this almost global empire notion. And I think I tried to bridge that gap between what Fomenko says, what the millennial reign people say, and then actual historical sources that we've got, which talk about things like the conquest of Siberia under the Russians. And I tried to marry those two things together and come up with a narrative that satisfies both camps or neither, I guess.
Right. So can I ask you, though, you're a history major, you studied history, you must have seen the horrors of communism and things like that. So I would just ask,
100%.
Sure, there's things that are not great about capitalism with a capital C, even if I'm not agreeing to anyone's definition, whatever, you can point out shortcomings. But I just want to know, and for the sake of all our audience, do you have as much to say for communism? Are you equally critical of communism? And do you see it as a downright, like, capital C communism the same way you see capitalism, where almost everyone's getting held to the same standard?
Yeah, very, very good question. I think communism in itself, I'm not in any way I'm not in any way politically tied to communism as a thing, right? If someone was to ask me what I am, I guess I would probably say I'm something along the lines of kind of like a neo-socialist, which is essentially just new socialism, because somebody decided once that socialism encompasses this kind of thing, and I agree with a few, but that doesn't mean that I'm a socialist. It just means that, unfortunately, people that have agreed with me have put it under that, so now I have to tell everyone I'm a socialist, apparently. It isn't that at all. If anything, I would say I'm a Jesusist. I try and follow what I believe Jesus was teaching, and I like to marry that with my morals, and I like to kind of put that into a utopian vision of society and how that Christian outlook would look in a modern post-classical society. Because obviously the type of utopia we see with heaven in the Bible, they didn't know what an iPhone was. So things are going to be a little bit different. Now, to go to communism, communism was awful. The way the Russians implemented it, you can say what you want about it. I know there's a lot of people that will try and use the J word about communism and stuff like, and socialism, stuff like that. I would never go down that route, because I don't like to play the racism card with anything. People are people, you know what I mean? But yeah, what communism did in particular towards religion is disgraceful. And I think that in itself shows that the people that were implementing it aren't the type of people that you would trust to implement communism anyway.
So if you like the teachings of Jesus, can you not accept, or do you accept that the so-called capitalist nations have done more to spread the word of Jesus, the message of Jesus, and today have the highest Christian populations?
I mean, you could say
And
so, but at the same time,
socialism and communism almost and always inevitably reach nihilism. And by the way, this whole the whole scarcity mindset that you were kind of reinforcing earlier is pretty much the driving factor behind greedy capitalism with a capital C, but definitely communism. Because if labor equals value, and blah blah blah, whatever.
well,
But
okay, well, I'll try and answer. If I was to argue the morals of it, I'd say the opposite. This idea of treating God's field, as he says it, you know, if the owner comes back, you give the stuff back and you leave the field because it's not yours. I would say that the idea of treating God's planet as just an infinite playground, like there'll always be more, without looking after it, would be against what God would want. If you're looking after his house, he would expect you to treat it with respect. If he comes home and he says, "Where the hell are all my Cokes?" He said, "We drank all the Cokes. You didn't go to the shop and get me more Cokes?" And I think that would be an important way to look at it. It's just because God created it doesn't mean it's our playground to just do what we want with it and then leave it a mess and go to sleep. In terms of the capitalism spreading Christianity, yeah, I would definitely agree that capitalism did a great job spreading Christianity, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing. God used plagues to send a message, and I wouldn't say that plagues are a good thing. So God used negative things to send a message. So just because God used something to deliver a message doesn't mean the deliverer was good. You could say that about the Roman Empire. The Romans did a pretty good job after 325 and before of spreading Christianity, and at the same time, they did a really good job of killing loads of Christians with things like the Diocletian and Maximian edicts and stuff like that.
But
So
capitalism upholds objective value, whereas communism says it's the need of the people that'll determine the value of any certain thing. So a gold bar having an intrinsic value beyond just whether someone down the road needs bread or not it transcends capitalism, and it reinforces the Bible and objective beauty, objective aesthetic value, and aesthetic value being the determinator for so many things that communists would say are frivolous. You know, what did socialism do away with? The beautiful architecture. It brought about brutalism. The worst things about America came about during our biggest points of socialism and things like
but
this.
then again, you could say easily you could say now, if we look at like the modern, or say neo-modern or postmodern architecture, you can see, especially in office buildings, in fact, old world order, your video that you were on, so not your video, but they went into this exactly. Look at the old world and look how beautiful it was in the utopian society. And then now look at the horrible world that we're building in capitalism. So your guys actually make my point for me, which is, as the money people get in charge, they start cutting corners. They just make everything as cheap as they can, print out the plastic buildings, make you live in that, because that's the world they want. Make everything cheaper and just make as much money off you, because they don't care about you. You're just a farm animal.
So let's just make sure we're on the same page of definitions. When would you say John D. Rockefeller was a capitalist? Just a quick question, because there's a follow-up.
Well, I mean, I don't know his personal beliefs, but I would assume, going off
Making a bunch of money,
off his thing, you'd assume he's part of a capitalist, yeah?
Okay. Now, when he says competition is a sin, is he still a capitalist?
Well, yeah, because you're saying, like, just because someone's winning at a game doesn't mean that they like the other opponents, right? So if I'm playing Monopoly, it doesn't mean that I want you guys to be there at the board winning as much money, because I want to win all the money. So saying competition's a sin, if you want to be the ultimate capitalist, then yes, competition, sorry, is a sin. That was a slip of the tongue, wasn't it? I always said communism is a sin. But again, it is. You know, I'm not defending communism or socialism. I'm not that at all. I'm just
Right.
pointing out that we've got a big issue with capitalism that capitalists don't want you to know about. And I
I don't know.
personally
I
believe
think we've got a greed problem. I think it's just
yeah,
a,
no,
it's a
well,
boogeyman
and I
problem. It's a
think
boogeyman argument. You know, the greed
maybe,
is
but I
behind it.
think it's facilitated. I think our narcissistic society right now, I think it benefits those people that run the money system to constantly have us be narcissistic, and that's why they want to send us TikToks and videos that make us
Sure.
violent and
Again,
arseholes, because
brought about by Chinese socialist communists, TikTok.
but I mean, quite clearly used in a capitalist country.
But
So
you don't
what
even
you're
know
trying to
that.
say
It
is
doesn't even
that
make, it doesn't even make a profit. TikTok
I
doesn't
just
even make a
don't
profit.
I just
but I
don't
mean, well, no,
They barely
TikTok's
made
a
a profit
specific
for
example. I'm saying,
free.
so why would TikTok, the communists, go out of their way to trick all of us into buying the capitalists' products? That doesn't
because
really
it's not
make
truly
sense.
capitalist.
Because
That's
they want our freedom. You know, we purchased this bookstore from a Hungarian immigrant who escaped socialism. It was communism, escaped communism, Hungary in the 50s,
But I think you're just
came to
confusing
America.
freedom with capitalism, because, like I said, you could start
Aren't you
restaurants 3,000
okay?
years ago.
At risk of being redundant and at risk of, you know, returning to the same spot, aren't you confusing capitalism with greed that we've been
Well,
dealing
no,
with
no,
for
definitely
3,000
not.
years or 6,000 years? I would say so.
I
would
think
have
Well,
to
as
say
in,
so.
well,
look,
because
can you hold on? Can you hold on? You're one thing you're just not acknowledging about capitalism is you're not acknowledging that monopoly is not a part of capitalism. In a
And
true,
also,
well,
can you
okay,
can you
right.
understand that in a true free capitalist society, these people would have these corporations where they do these things, but someone can compete against them at a lower price without being sent to jail for plagiarism or violating some sort of patent.
But
That's
you
not
do realize,
capitalism.
but you do realize that, like, what you're asking for is like physically impossible. You're asking for a society where Google has as much money as it can, but it never does anything bad to squish the little man, because
What?
that's what's going to happen,
That's not
because
what I'm
they've
asking
got
for.
all that power.
I'm asking for a society where Google can do everything
And
they're
again,
doing right now, but I
and
can
like I
also
said,
create my own Google that doesn't get shut down by Google. That's what I'm
right.
asking for.
Yeah, and and you won't get that because Google is currently in power. So it's
But that's not
yes, but you
this
can,
is a
yes, but you can be
recursive
in
argument.
power. But
It's
Luke,
a
you can be in
recursive. Yeah, but
power.
I won't get into power.
Wouldn't you rather
That's
live in a system where you can get as
that.
rich as you want rather than you have to inevitably say, well, now I'm going to decide how rich Shem can get?
Right. Okay. So this is a recursive argument. So basically, we're in a current situation where we're being kept in a prison, and I'm saying, guys, this is
I
a bit
don't
of
know
a
about
prison
that. I think
setup,
we
and
live in
you're
the
going,
kingdom
oh,
of heaven.
guys. How about we just, we just change your mindset, because you're actually in a world where you can get out of prison, right? No, it doesn't matter, right? I don't want to get rich, okay? I don't care about getting rich. Who wants to get rich, right? That's selfish. Getting rich is selfish. At the
But
end of
Wouldn't
the
be that
day,
bad.
if you, hey,
It
yeah,
wouldn't be that
if
bad.
you want,
You'd be
dude,
okay.
dude,
You'd be
dude.
no,
okay.
but right, resources,
You'd
right?
still be
You
good.
got to think of it like this, because resources are a physical
We're all
thing,
living
right?
good. We're living good.
To own stuff is to take it away from outside. So if I've got more
No,
food, if there's a
no,
food
God gave us
supply and I
dominion.
take it inside, then I've got some of the food. So it's quite, again, it's simple economics of how much food you've got. If we go back to the Egyptian times, every year they'd get their grain harvest and they'd look at how much grain they've got for the year, and they'd think, oh God, we've not got enough grain this year, because that's how the old societies would have to live their lives, because they need their food. Think of of Ant Life, the movie, where it's a big deal to get that food in for the season. That's what we were like, right? But we don't do that anymore, because you and me, we're not bothered about the food supply, because somebody else is in control of the food supply. Someone else is doing all that. We just
I don't know.
go to our normal jobs, do our thing, and then we go to the shops and we pay the money,
We
right?
got fruit
So
in Florida,
we
bro.
never have to deal. We never have to deal with communal kind of starving ourselves and choosing this the other, and saying, oh well, this month we're going to have to go light on wheat because we've not got this much, etc. And again, I'm not I'm not angry with what you were talking about, free market, but that isn't capitalism. Is in capitalism's a new thing. For thousands of years, you were able to start a restaurant. For thousands of years, you could make a restaurant free, and someone else can have a restaurant. It's fine. But the problem is, at some point in the future, you'll want to start a restaurant, but every piece of land will be owned by a McDonald's, and you won't. Or you can start it,
You
but
don't.
the point
No,
is,
but
is
if you're better,
you'll never
outperform
actually
them.
get anywhere.
No,
Outperform the global
I
McDonald's.
think that you're
Okay.
voicing the fears of the unremarkable, the untalented, the people who are expecting an equal share of what, talented, more powerful people. There's an objective measurement of power. This physical power. Physically stronger people are
Yeah, and
gonna
doesn't the
need.
Bible say the meek will inherit the earth? So
Sure.
yeah, so technically what I'm doing is empowering the meek. Yeah, I'm telling the meek that you're gonna own the earth one day. Take it from the rich.
Well, we
Stop
No,
letting
that's
people tell you that
no,
you're
no.
not good
Rage
enough.
against the machine always ends up
You-
raging with the machine.
you just have a different perspective about what like it's like you're viewing this from a very narrow-minded point of view, as if there's only one type of person in the world. Like there's other people.
Well, I
And I'm not,
mean,
hold on, hold on.
to
Let me
say
finish. Let
something
me
like
finish. Let me
that though
finish.
is
Let me
just
finish.
completely like wrong, because you just made an assumption about what I'm doing. I'm not assuming there's one type of person in the world at all. So everything
So
you're
then
about
why
to
aren't
say
you
is just a
acknowledging?
straw man.
No, I'm not. So why aren't you acknowledging that in the world that I'm asking for, going back to your previous point, Google exists. They do everything that they're doing right now completely fine as far as like buying whatever they want. But I also have the ability to start my own Google where it doesn't get shut down by Google.
Okay.
Where does that fit into your
So what was your point?
My point is that in true capitalism or true free market society, I can start a Google and provide
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
We're at no
provide.
Yeah,
fear.
but yeah,
Hold
There's
on a
no
second.
fear or
isn't it?
threat. There's
Hold on
no
a
fear or
second.
threat. I can
I can prov-
outperform McDonald's if I want to.
So
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
okay.
So
So I'll tell
people
you
will
what.
start.
If you go and outperform McDonald's,
I
I
can't even.
will take my back. Well, I'm sorry, I was just
Well, no,
answering what you said. But
I'm living proof of it. I don't go to McDonald's just because they're everywhere. You see that, right? There's a thing called self-control. That's why it goes back down to the virtues and vices. You don't need to worry about which corporation is currently in power, because ultimately you have the same degree of self-control. And yes, you're saying that McDonald's can buy up every piece of land. They're still not going to be able to force me to eat their food. I have that in my hand. There's no scarcity mindset driving my decisions. There's no abundance
no, but they
mindset
can
driving
own
my
all the land and then stop you growing your own food
No,
underneath.
no, no, that's a fear. That's a fear that only a Brit would have, because we have guns here. We love freedom. And as soon as anyone steps on our toes, bang, bang,
Well,
you
it's
know,
funny, isn't it? Because you say that, but then you're afraid of anyone putting any kind of restrictions on your corporations. So you're like, hey, I don't have
that's not
fear,
true.
but
That's not
well,
true.
this the point. Look,
We
That's
hate
not
the
true.
corporations.
fair enough. In your
Are
world
you
model where there's
talking to me?
infinite supplies,
I'm pro corporation.
yeah, that's what it sounds like, man. You're defending
I'm
the
the hippie.
corporations.
I'm the hippie of all hippies, by the way.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a wild card hippie. You're like the hippie that's actually
Oh, you
got
mean
a
like
bank
Jesus?
card
You
supplied
mean
by
like
McDonald's
every
himself.
every philosopher there's ever been who's,
Look, I love to indulge, man.
not
I'd be
too
the first
ascetic.
person to cry if I destroyed capitalism. I'd be the first person to cry because I'd be like, wait,
I don't know.
McDonald's is gone.
Would
But
you have you ever like marched with Antifa or anything, or like
no, apparently they don't appreciate blackface. But
whatever?
no, I'm joking. I'm not related to Trudeau. But no,
Yeah,
the point I was making earlier is just that it isn't what you're like conflating between the two is that you want Google, for example, to not shut you down when you
Who?
make your own Google.
Me or Shem?
Shem, sorry. Yeah, Shem was saying about Google not shutting you down. And like, I wasn't meaning to get angsty with you, but like, I feel like I've said it over and over again that, yeah, that's fine, but that's not at all related to what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that this is an economics point of view. So I think he's a Nobel Prize winning economist. Is it Stephen Chu?
Faggot.
He is, yeah,
Sounds like a
literally said,
loser.
well, yeah, literally said capitalism's a pyramid scheme. And we all know how pyramid schemes
Oh
work.
my
You
god.
need somebody coming in underneath. And it's always like that. You always need a lower class of people. You need a lower class of people to do the jobs of the upper class. So
Can I?
That's the one portion of class stuff that comes into the wealth.
You ever
that
shot
is-
a gun?
No, I haven't actually.
Can I get like 3 sentences real
Case in
quick?
point.
So like,
Go on.
and what I'm talking about here is that even though it's unrealistic that if I created an alternative to Google or an alternative McDonald's or whatever corporation you want to put into the position, even though it's unrealistic that I would beat them, the idea is that if I provide a better service, that eventually people will stop using that service and then start using mine instead, and they won't be able to shut me down or put me out because of a monopoly. Is what I'm saying here. So
Yeah,
theoretically,
which
since Google sucks, and that's the reason why people don't want to use it, if I create an actual uncensored search engine that isn't able to get shut down by these people would start using that, and then the company would grow over time. And then my choice at that point is, do I want to make money or do I want to provide a service where I'm just breaking even, or do I want to do this for free? That's
but that
my
thing
idea of
can
capitalism. I may be
that
wrong, but
thing
it's my
can
idea.
exist.
Here,
Yeah,
let's-
okay, right. So I'll just confirm, right? That's fine, and it works in what would call the post-capitalism world, right? It's fine. The issue is our current use of resource management. As a current use of resource management on a larger scale is what I'm trying to say, because we've hit the monopoly point. So think of a game of Monopoly. You know, when you start the game and it's really fun, everyone's rolling dice and they're getting everything. And you know, at the end of the game, when everyone already owns everything and there's only like 3 of you and you're just hopping around the board, paying each other money until someone finally owns everything, that's life. That's what's going to happen. And that's the point I'm making, is that if we don't stop corporations, eventually Amazon or whichever one it's going to be is essentially going to own everything, and you're going to be buying everything from the company store. You're going to be buying all the electronics, all the food. They'll all be the same brand. It'll be like, it's that dystopian.
I don't know. This is like your negative imagination. No
but it's
offense.
not negative. It's simply going to happen. It's like inevitable.
No, they're going to fail and falter.
Sounds like communism.
Yeah, but if they
For real.
fail, somebody has to
Where's
take
your
all
faith?
their resources.
Where's your faith, brother? What Bible are you
Well-
reading? The Amazon Handbook? I mean,
What does it say in the Amazon
They will-
handbook? Please help us.
they will
Stop,
overcome.
Jeff. No, I'm just saying that we're in a part of life that's never been done like this before. We're at a point where money, billions of dollars, can be transferred instantly with the push of an electronic button, right? Society isn't prepared for the level of greed that can take place. So many ways to fuck up the world and to make money. This is my point. I don't really care what people do afterwards, but we need to find a new way to
faith?
sort out the distribution problem. Because the best way is the land issue. Okay, one day your great grandchild might be renting his apartment, out of the back of a McDonald's, and
No.
that's just not a
Why
society.
are you so committed to this future? You're like forcing us to live in the hypothetical future.
I'm the one asking you to
I
not
don't see
live in the
that. The
future.
horizon-
I'm the exact
with
opposite
all
of
due
that,
respect,
actually.
Luke.
I'm the one dude blowing the whistle right now and
No,
saying,
I don't
"Come on,
believe that.
let's
No,
change
you-
direction on this ship."
With all due respect, I think you'd fit in just fine with an Antifa like sidewalk protest. Is
All right. Well, I
some-
didn't
some
turn
of
up
what
to
I'm
be
hearing.
insulted by Chewbacca, so come on,
by a what?
Chewbacca.
A Chewbacca?
I'm saying you're a Wookiee-looking motherfucker.
I'm Harry.
It's a hairy
All right.
dude. Yeah, you got there.
Oh my
Right
god.
there.
All right, so
If you're gonna call me Antifa,
Let's-
I'll insult your locks. Nah, I'm only jealous, really. I don't have long hair.
all right, so I think that maybe this is a good point to probably wrap up the conversation. Unfortunately,
definitely.
even
It's
though we
10
have
past 3.
even though we have two of the greatest researchers together, for some reason we talked about politics. I apologize.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to label people, but it seems like you're playing with communism too much. You're romanticizing it. You're making a boogeyman out of capitalism.
I mean,
It's
I
what
specifically
a lot of British
said
people do.
multiple times. Specifically
also
said
kinda-
multiple
you've also
times that
kinda
I
got-
don't like capitalism.
You've also kind of got island syndrome, like scarcity mindset. I live on an island. It's very crowded here, so everyone lives on an island. It's very crowded everywhere. Come to America
Excuse
sometime.
me.
Lots-
What
lots-
does
lots
your
of room.
flat Earth look like again, floating through the sky? Just a giant island. So who has island syndrome?
That's okay.
Jesus.
I'm only joking, but thank you. I do. Obviously, we disagree on the politics points of view. I don't appreciate constantly being labeled as communist when I spent like half of it saying, by the way, not a communist. But it's
Okay.
okay because
You're not.
you know.
So,
You're
but
not.
am I being held to the same standard? Am I automatically a capitalist, or am I somewhere in
No,
between?
no, definitely not. No,
Okay, yeah, so if I-
again, I'm not arguing against you as the capitalist, old world capitalist. I'm arguing with a certain point of view, and again, I'm not arguing with you. I'm more arguing for something, just in the point of view of trying to get a message across that maybe we need to be a little bit more protective of the planet. And I guess my closing argument for anyone that was on the Christian side would be the thing I said before about we're in God's house. We need to treat it with a bit of respect. And that would be the way I view it.
Yeah, we all agree. I'm not sure where all the disagreements and like labeling came from, but I think that you could equally say that all sides are guilty of it here. So don't hold it against each other, please. I would prefer to have a conversation if we ever do this again about actual research instead of this retarded shit. But
yeah, we definitely won't do politics again.
I don't know. I think capitalism's occupying an unhealthy portion of your brain, and you should just let it go. There's not, you don't have to worry that much about some greedy person or some rich person. There's
I wouldn't say having
things.
a discussion with someone for like
You could
however
let
long
off.
this has been would mean that I'm obsessed with it, because to make that kind of statement, surely you'd have to have like a long extensive list of cases where you've experienced me being obsessed with capitalism, and you wouldn't just make such an assumption over a short period
No,
of
it's
time.
an
Right?
assumption. It's an assumption. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't like to disagree with someone on something and then just immediately call them obsessed with it, right? Because that just comes across as if you're,
You said obsessed.
Okay. Well, you said spending an unhealthy amount of time on capitalism after I had one conversation about it.
I think judging off this one conversation, we spent an unhealthy amount of time on capitalism. It's like a boogeyman, It's more of a scary thing. You're making it out to be more of a scary problem than it is.
I feel like you veil insults sometimes in what you're saying. You kind of like you just veil it over there with it.
No, I don't think that's insulting. I'd say that to a friend or my brother, and it's said in earnest. I don't think hippie-looking motherfuckers nice. I think you veiled that with the little,
I said a
at the
Wookiee
end.
looking motherfucker. Chewbacca.
You said Chewbacca or whatever. You and I both know I look like a damn cross between Jesus and Jupiter. So
I was expecting Thor with the Nordic stuff.
Same thing, but whatever.
Yeah.
6 hour. Yeah, you're right. It is my fault. I apologize to the chat. Sorry. Thought maybe we could talk about some history.
I don't know what we're going to talk about. Whatever.
Yeah.
No, I don't veil my. Watch my videos. I don't veil my insults. Definitely not. I had a good talk. I'm glad we got to talk some politics and stuff that I usually talk about.
Say I don't have a political group. I don't vote for left or right when it comes to stuff. I don't agree with that kind of stuff. I think you should just. I think people shouldn't have camps when it comes to this. You should just genuinely sit down with God or whoever is your higher being and just battle out your morals the same way you would with your vegetarianism. I'm sure you'd tell people to battle that one out with themselves.
Well, some smart people have put a lot of thinking to this. So when I say Republican, I don't care if George Bush says he's a Republican or whatever. When I'm saying Republican, I'm using Plato's definition of the Republic. We're not a democracy. We don't, there's certain things that I don't think we're capitalist either. So, I think that's a boogeyman for a lot of people is saying that, this is like the big bad wolf that America or the whole world's up against. The virtues and this vices clearly trump that and transcend it. And like I said, you raise someone in a warehouse and they've never heard of capitalist or communist. You're still going to deal with greed. You're still going to come across gluttony. You're still going to see lust. You're still going to see, these things. So
Indeed. I just think it's definitely up to us to make sure that we create a society that doesn't like facilitate those things, you know, because I think you have that argument that you made before about that. And obviously, if we didn't have the opportunity to sin, then, you know, none of it would matter. But at the same time, just having the opportunity to sin doesn't give you the freedom to just like allow it and facilitate it, encourage it. Do you know what I mean? Because at what point then do you become just as bad as the adversary? You know, what
Right.
point do you become somebody that's seducing others into bad things in the name of, you know, freedom?
well said. And I kind of see capitalism the same way. Is God did not want us to be animalistic and lacking in free will. He gave us all the virtues and vices at our fingertips. He gave us the capability to be a school shooter at our fingertips. That was his ultimate grand design. And that's where you extract the most good out of the story of life, is having that villain that you're up against. And, you know, that could be violence, it could be greed. But capitalism is the reinforcement of God's values. And I do see it as the direct manifestation of God's teachings in the economic world, because it places the emphasis on responsibility, individual responsibility, which is what Jesus preaches as well. That's what the Old Testament preaches ultimately, if you can see through the sacrifice systems. And the fact that it's all in your own hands, and you do have the absolute power to become as rich as any man has ever been. And you have the complete, nothing's protecting you from being as poor as you can be. The same way nothing's protecting you from being as virtuous as you want. More virtue. Doesn't matter how much the corporation next to you is virtuous or unvirtuous. You can exceed them in virtue. And likewise, money would have to be the same thing, because anytime you're talking about anything other than free market, anytime you're talking about anything other than whatever capitalist, you're talking about restriction and governance. And the more governance, the more control, the more tyranny will find its foothold. Not through freedom, not through complete liberty. So it's my closing argument, I guess, whatever.
Genuine question. Do you reckon there would be business in heaven?
No. There's not business in the Garden of Eden.
So why not?
Either. Why not? Because you eat the fruit. It was like a borderline animal existence. The free will hadn't complicated things yet.
But as in heaven, as we're like kind of told, like with God, new earth style place where all the good people go. Do you think there'll be business there, or?
Well, heaven means the sky, and God gives us clear definitions of heaven. And let's just make sure we're not presupposing somebody else's superstitions, because when I see heaven, it's clearly defined in the Bible as where the stars are, where the planets are, where the changing of the days and the seasons is being shown, the signs and the seasons in Genesis. That's the heavens, heaved up to the sky. That's what heaven means. So when you die, you don't just go to a family park and, oh, there's the dog, there's my family, but hey, we don't need to do business. No, I think that's superstitious. And I think that's very much like kindergarten level Christianity is saying, hey, we graduated this life and now we're all together in the second life. Like, I think it's much more complex than that. And Jesus did preach rebirth, to be born again, to be born again. I think a lot of people miss out on that. And I think we will all be born again.
Do you think that's literal reincarnation then? Yeah. Or is it
Yes.
more, but in what sense? Is in new life, like Indian, you've gone through the blender and come back as something else, or as in you still retain your personal sense of self, or?
Well, judging from some of the people who've claimed to wake up or remember their past lives, there clearly is a degree of personality that comes with it. And personality meaning this is me, this is who I am. My name can change, my body can change, but there's still a degree of the way I'm going to act, the way I'm going to remember things, the way I'm going to want things. You've seen that with, the kid who realized that he was a airplane fighter jet pilot. There's people in India who woke up and said that this family murdered me in the last life. There's clear documented cases of reincarnation. And I'm a full believer. I'm actually pretty convinced. I never talk about this because it will totally reduce my credibility. But I'm fairly convinced on who I was in the past life. It's not, what I want to talk about or glorify myself or anything, but I'm pretty convinced on who I was and who I came to realize it perfectly matches with other people who claim to know who they are having a closeness in birthdays. So if we're going to heaven when we die, and if there's rebirth, it would seem we'd have to come from heaven too. We're not coming from hell. We're not coming from underneath. So the soul being light, soul, solo, undivided, uninhibited light from the sun, that comes from the heaven, and it's going to return, and it originates from. So I think your birthday has a heck of a lot to do with it. I'm not big into Edgar Cayce or David Wilcock, but David Wilcock claims to be Edgar Cayce reincarnated. And it's easy to brush him off until you realize they're born a couple days apart. They're both Pisces, and they're both doing Piscean, occupations. Pisces rules sleeping and dreaming, and prophets being psychic, like prophet and money prophet. It rules finance, the fin of a fish, finance, fiscal fish. All this money goes back to Pisces. The tarot card for Pisces is the moon, so money. And all of that, I forgot what I was talking about. Doesn't matter.
Well, you're big into Plato and Plato's Republic, and they talk about being reincarnated.
Yes.
At the end of that, and I think
The story of air.
Yeah, kind of the stuff that you guys are brushing on earlier with the way society's designed and stuff. It's in that specific. Yeah. They talk about you having the ability to be reincarnated as an animal, depending on the choices that you make in life, or maybe your attitude in the afterlife and the choices that you make in that situation. So maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe that's the reason why a lot of people don't have these memories and stuff like that, is because a lot of people are sinning their entire lives and just being reincarnated as animals.
Well, that's another thing is when you get hit by a car or whatever, you forget. The body naturally forgets. It intentionally forgets. It forgets the most traumatic. I hate the word trauma. The word trauma is the most cringe, navel-gazing BS I've ever heard in my life. It's so overused today. But let's just, forgive me, guys. Forgive me. We're going to say trauma. The trauma in this life has to be forgotten for you to thoroughly enjoy the next. This is why it's only people who are completely taking their karma or their spiritual path or committing to a spiritual path who are usually, will have access to that information, because it's going to take a karmic toll. If you're really going to say, and I'm not saying I remember any of the bad things in my past life or anything. I am only making a guess. But the whole thing with, you have to forget. It's the contract that we sign up to. You can't have 3 lives in your brain trying to live this one. So when people say one day we can learn how to access your past life, no, it's never going to. It's always going to be the same difficulty to access that information. And I didn't access it consciously. I'm not saying I'm a psychic or anything like that. But as far as we're never going to see a day where every single person knows what their past life was. It's never going to come. The human brain doesn't work like that. God doesn't work like that. I think that a lot of these opinions about like shifting from human to animal can be valid if we're talking about someone who's consuming something that a human shouldn't be consuming. You will change species, I think. And when it says you are what you eat, that's probably precisely what it's talking about.
That's not the only example you find it in. You find it in the Kabbalah as well. For some reason, that same concept that you find in Plato's Republic is there.
Mm-hmm. And that's air.
I'm just thinking about the ungodly homunculus that I will be if I become what I eat. Just like screaming mess on the floor. Kill me.
I think you'll come back in the next life as Stalin's penis, probably.
Go on. That dude saw a lot of red.
But they actually drink something in Plato's Republic to make them forget their memories. I can't remember what it was called though.
Yeah. No, it wasn't Ambrosia, was it?
Could have been.
Something like that. But yeah, but his name's Air. So think about his name. It's to go wrong, to make a mistake. The man who saw the cycles of life and the fates weaving his life together at the point of rebirth, who was granted a glimpse into the future and the past and his own, rebirth. His name was Air. So it's hard to separate that from error into air. And, either seeing what he had done wrong or to look back into your own life is an error. There's different ways to interpret that. But,
someone just brought up David Wilcock again after you mentioned him. And they said that he seems a bit scammy.
oh,
And
yeah,
I don't want
I'm
to
with
comment.
you. But Edgar
I
Casey
agree.
also kind of was too.
So
Edgar Casey was pretty out there too.
I was going to say recently he's had a bit of a mental breakdown because he was convinced that the solar eclipse was going to be ushering in the new age or the aliens coming back or whatever it was he thought at the moment. And obviously it didn't happen. So he's currently not doing too well. And then as well, he's had Corey Good, who's like his partner in crime. They do everything together. And basically that guy got outed for making up so much stuff, which I don't get how he didn't notice it. The guy claimed to have gone back in time with the government program. You know what I mean? Like, it's a bit out there, isn't it? If someone comes up to you and goes, "Hey, mate, I was on a government program. I worked for a time agency for 20 years. And then when I finished, they sent me back in time to when I was a child before I'd worked for them. And then I lived my life as a normal child." That's nuts. Like, that's insane. I mean, not to mention how weird it must have been for all the other kids in the class. Just like, does anyone else feel like Corey's like 38? We're all playing games and he's just worrying about his taxes again. Yeah.
Knows everything.
He keeps telling us he's been to space and time traveled and everything. Although we all know that kid in the playground, so maybe that kid was telling the truth this whole time. Oh well. But actually, interestingly, the ancient aliens, I found they have one connection to the old world order. They both believe that the energy was there. It was free energy from the atmosphere taken away by the government or the Nephilim, one of the two. And I thought it's interesting that two different groups of the conspiracy spectrum, and I'd say a lot of ancient aliens people won't believe in old world order, and a lot of old world order people won't believe in the ancient alien stuff. So they are groups that are opposed to each other's beliefs, yet at the core of it is this exact same principle, this stolen technology being lied to about our past. So it's maybe says something about us as a society, or maybe it says something honest about history.
It also just seems to be pointing out reality, saying that there are patents all around the world that make different inventions top secret or whatever else, and pretty much create a monopoly on all types of technologies. So, I mean, it's literally just describing reality, but it's the only difference is it's putting it further into the past. And both examples, one further back than the other, obviously.
Yo, we got almost 1,000 people in the chat. Hell yeah, guys. Thanks for being here, everyone. Drop an orange in the motherfucking chat, yeah? Drop some OJ, some tangerine emoji. Show some support. Drop an orange if you love freedom, if you love capitalism, if you're right-wing lunatic. Drop a fish for Shem. Show some support for Shem. That's a fucking tongue twister. Show some support for Shem. Say that 10 times fast. And Luke, you said you're a Virgo, right?
Yeah.
Drop a loaf of some bread. Drop a loaf of bread in the chat if you're vibing with Luke from Ancient Historia.
Hey,
Virgo,
look at that.
Bethlehem.
Knows his wheat harvest. Yeah, house of bread. Very good.
Yep. So, or a girl, or a maiden, a maiden emoji. or a black flag pirate ninja emoji for Antifa or whatever. But
Technically, you could use the fish symbol still because I've got the same birthday as Jesus, so Tishri 1.
I don't know about that.
Well, that's the day in the old Jewish. That's what they say.
No,
That's
no,
what they
no.
say.
Hell no.
Not
No,
me. That's what they say.
no, it's Virgo. Jesus was not a Virgo. He was either a Pisces because of how he acted and what he was ushering in, or he was a Capricorn because of the winter solstice and other messiahs and other whatever. Or that's really it. He can only be a Pisces or a
I mean,
Capricorn by birth.
there's two really. There's there. They could obviously there's Bethlehem, so he's going to be born in Bethlehem, so he's going to be born in Virgo, and then
Right.
you've got the Virgin Mary, obviously, who is the Virgo. She's the woman. So if
Mhm.
you watch the solar mythology side of it, which I'm sure you know, during September in the wheat harvest, it would go through. The sun would literally pass through the Virgin, and because it was the new year, they'd say, the Virgin has birthed a new son. So it makes loads of sense why they would have
Right.
had that start of the year.
Okay.
And as well,
Are you aware that 9 months after Virgo is the birth of the sun in Easter time, March spring equinox? 9 months, if you were to be if we're talking about the Son of God, then clearly it was you could say conceived in Bethlehem and birthed in springtime. You could also look at it as Jesus is clearly Pisces, the fish. You can't take that away from him. You can try to attach Virgo to him, but you cannot take the fish away from Jesus. And looking at the axis that Pisces and Virgo are on, Pisces and Virgo are on the same. They're right across from each other on the zodiac. So Gemini, the axes of the zodiac are kind of like twins. They're like sister signs. So Gemini is opposite Sagittarius. Gemini is either or, right and left. The two options, right and left, the twins. Whereas Sagittarius is up and down. The human nature above overtaking the animal nature below. Right?
Mm.
And that's the same twin concept, but on the other side of the table. Same concept, same theme being reflected on either side of the zodiac. So that's the thing that most firmly links Pisces and Virgo is the fact that they're most compatible together. My brother's a Pisces. He's probably going to marry a Virgo that he's been with for a long time. Virgos and Pisces do so good together. But the concept, they're all about service. Virgo is all about surface and service, and Pisces is all about surface and service.
But then, of course, you obviously know that Christianity essentially derives from the Egyptian. And now, if we go back to the Egyptian, you've got the story of Horus's Seti.
Are you talking about Philo, or what are you talking about?
I don't know about that.
What is in derives from? Well, you've got obviously. Are you talking to me there?
Yeah.
Me?
Shem.
Yeah. Are
Yeah,
you
with what you said.
your Christianity being
as in Christianity
Philo's theology or before Philo?
As in, well, obviously it comes down thousands of years, but you've got the Israelite stuff, which is heavily influenced by their time in Egypt anyway.
Okay. Well, yes.
So,
but they were Israelites before they went to Egypt.
But Jesus is right.
The cross,
so Jesus is one of the
cross and the solar redemption was present north, closer to the North Pole, way before.
Yeah, but we've got this archetype of Horus, right, which is Jesus, right? So
Sure.
Horus archetype fighting Seti. So the way they would do it, so obviously the Egyptian start of the year, which is why it's the house of bread, is the wheat harvest in September, which is why Tishri 1 was the Jewish New Year originally until Moses said change it, right? So they changed it to Nisan. So in Tishri 1, that's the start of the year. So again, that makes sense why each year it's a new sun. So it's a simple story here. And then the summer solstice is obviously when the sun is at its strongest, when light is overpowered darkness completely because there's more hours in light than dark. It then rules until the autumn equinox, when now darkness overtakes the light. So it kills the sun pretty much, or it defeats it in battle. It doesn't kill him yet. He doesn't die until he reaches the cross, which is at Christmas, the winter solstice, when the sun appears to hang on the crux, which is why we've got the cross in the sky, and then the sun hangs on it there. That stays for 3 days, which is why
Yes.
Jesus 3 days on the cross, and then it starts
Right.
moving back. And it's
Very
not
familiar.
until yeah. Obviously, I'm just saying for the people that are watching, it's not until it gets to Easter when you say, "Oh, well, Jesus has been revived now." So yeah, you
Okay.
could say with what you said about Jesus being born in Easter for that equinox, but I think you could also argue on the other side, possibly, for it being the revival of Jesus and not the birth, because he's reviving. It's Horus overcoming the darkness. So at that
Okay.
point, there is now more hours of light than dark. But it wasn't
Yes.
obviously until the new year that they say, "Oh, now this is a new sun." So it makes sense why they would say, "Ah, a new sun is coming. A new sun is coming to Bethlehem," right? Because they're telling you, it's just a new year. So it might have been a very important new year, but I think
Okay.
if you were to go accurately, the reason obviously why they changed it to Christmas was to match Sol Invictus, because they were trying to get the Romans on, like people that were already pagan in Rome already had all these holidays. So they were like, well, let's integrate these. So at the Council of Nicaea 325, they were like, oh, it'd be a good idea if we put his
Okay.
birthday on the same day as Mithras and Sol Invictus to encourage the
Is
pagans to jump over to Christianity.
Can I pop in here?
Yeah, sure.
Great. Lots of good points, but again, there's two main factors that kind of solve this. The point about, we pressed you on that deriving from Egypt, but what you really cited was the stars in the heavens. You said, well, it's Egypt because it's Horus, but then it's the story in the heavens. So why is, number one, that's not unique to Egypt, and it could have been learned from anywhere. And no matter who's Jewish or not, or who's reading a Bible, they're still going to be telling the same Savior stories because we're all looking at the same sun. It's all the same astrotheology. That's the beauty of astrotheology, and why Adam and Eve were not given a Bible in one language with one printing press, because it would get corrupted. It would get, misinterpreted. In the stars, it's objective. And that's why the word of God can never, ever change. And then, sorry, what were we just talking about?
The connection between, you're trying to say that you're like rebut against him saying that Christianity comes out of Egypt. I'm not sure exactly where you're
Yes.
going.
Right. So the idea that the solar worship and stuff came solely from Egypt, I would refute. And I'd say that was present in Scandinavia. That was also, the Semitic people took way more from the Scythians, Assyrians, Sumerians than they did the Egyptians. They're actually pretty opposed to Egyptian habits and customs. And they're some of the least that they adopted and took with them. They were isolated from the get-go, whereas the Scythians, all these people who clearly have Northern European ancestry. If the farther back you go, the bushier the beards, Northern European ancestry. The
Well,
higher
okay,
the
but yeah,
bridge to the
I
nose.
completely I accept what you're saying, and I wasn't trying to suggest that it was only from there they were coming from. You're completely right with what you're saying. I think my point was that it's not really relevant where it's come from. The point is that the stories are there, and they're there before Jesus, and they match. So where it came from, whether it came from Scandinavia or Egypt, doesn't matter so much. What does matter is that we know that they were basing this astrological story on a specific time of year, and therefore it is very likely that Jesus would have actually been born exactly when it's telling you, and that they changed it for the Christmas story, because obviously it's there. But it's either or, like I say. Any opinion on it is at this point an opinion. Without us having the opportunity to actually go back in time and ask one of these people, I don't think we'll ever truly know. But both sides are completely viable, and I agree that it doesn't mean that it came from Egypt, but I think it speaks for itself about the house of bread being Bethlehem and the Virgin Mary literally being the Virgin. It's like it's double telling you, it's not just once, it's twice.
But you could say, but with all due respect, you could actually pick out each of the zodiac signs being clearly expressed leading up to the birth of Jesus. And in fact, I could fixate, no offense, if I were a Cancer, like you're a Virgo, I could simply fixate on the three wise men being Sirius and say, well, clearly he was born when Sirius was pointing to to the star at the bottom, which even though the Bible doesn't give a date, it does tell us that 3 wise men traveled far and wide following a star in the east. That's Sirius. That's undeniably Sirius, a star in the east, the bright star. And 3 wise men, it's hard to just 3 wise kings even is impossible to detach from Orion and Orion's belt. And Sirius, Cancer is Sirius, the dog star. So if we were any sign of the zodiac, we could fixate on any one portion of the events leading up to the birth of Jesus. And just bear with me here. The idea that Jesus was born in the manger, even though that's not explicitly said in the Bible, but the fact that he was born in the manger tells us that he represents all the signs of the zodiac. He is the zodiac. He was born in the zoo. He was born amongst all the animals, and he took them with him into later life via the 12 disciples. You could look at Cancer in Sirius. You could look at the fact that there was a tax collecting as one sign of the zodiac. You could look at the fact that children were being executed prior to his birth or right after as evidence of one sign of the zodiac. So I think you're just, you're doing what a Sagittarius, I would love to glorify Sagittarius to the best, and I do. You know what I mean? There's nothing, you're not guilty of anything wrong, but I think it's like having blinders on that are tailor-made to your zodiac sign.
Oh yeah, 100%. But I mean, it wasn't. I didn't know that one until until after, if you know what I mean. I was researching it, and I was never bothered by astrology, and never been an astrology person. And then I got fascinated by the Jesus solar mythology story, and I think it fascinated me even more because I found that generally Christians didn't like the idea of solar mythology, because obviously it would take away that idea that Jesus was real, and say like, oh, well, he's just a story in the sky, and then that's very offensive, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I found that kickback even when I was there trying to say to people like, oh, guys, the Bible says as above, so below, so why can't it be both? Why can't it take place down here and up there? But people, again, they really don't like that idea.
Yes.
So
I'm in agreement.
It's a topic that's really interested me, of just like, when was he really born? Because if we're going to figure out this historical figure, then we need to know a bit about him. And it just fit for me, the fact that it was the start of the new year. It's also that exact day is Rosh Hashanah is considered the birth of the universe itself. And how kind of poetic would it be? And like you said about reincarnation, people seem to be born around their birthdays. It was a rabbi that I was listening to talk who said, how perfect would it be for the creator of the world to enter into the world in human form on the anniversary of the day he made it, and I thought, yeah, well, yes, of course, there's no better day to do it.
That's they're for sure good points. I would only like to point out that the Jewish calendar is an approximate, and what do they call it? Lunisolar, right? It's a lunisolar, so it's lunar and solar, but it's approximate. And it's kind of what the same thing that the church does when they're planning a holiday. And to me, holidays are objective. They have an objective meaning and origin in the stars. Like Mother's Day is in May, not because some American placed it in May. That's merely the how. There's a why behind it. It's Maya. It's May, it's Taurus, it's the Divine Mother, it's the fat, fucking ugly woman statues that they find in Europe that are like fat women who are supposed to be like the beautiful mother goddess of the Venus. That's very Tauresian, being fat and beautiful and earthy and nurturing and things like that. So, also, I forgot. Sorry, yeah, Shem.
I was gonna say, I think that's just one of the most fascinating things about the Bible and some of these other texts, is that they pretty much are describing multiple things, and it's open to interpretation. I mean, literally, allegorically, whatever else. I mean, I forget what the name of the guy was that says it, but he said that there's stories that never happen, but they always are. So I don't know. It's So I think debating some of these specific dates it's interesting, but it doesn't really take away from the overall message that you can take away from some of the stuff or the information.
I'm really sorry, guys, but I think I'm gonna have to call it quits because I've got another interview in about 8 hours, so I need some sleep. But I'd love to do this again if you'd be up for it, and we definitely won't do politics.
It's okay.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Yep.
Yeah, we're awfully close to the 4th of July here. We'll probably have to select a different significant date for a different topic of discussion.
Oh well, to be fair, I'm not into American politics anyway. As in, like, I can sit there and laugh at both if you wanted to do an election party. You know, anyone can watch Joe Biden forget things all day. It's hilarious. But I mean, we have our own thing.
I think that guy's pretty sharp. His memory's pretty damn good, if you ask me.
All right. The buzzword sharp that everyone said.
But July 4th, we've actually got our own elections, so I'll be avoiding politics all day anyway. So it'd be great because, you know, I like to exercise my rights and not even bother and vote for someone that won't win. So elections for me as an independent voter is like you lose every election. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter who wins, you always lose. That's the greatest thing about being individual.
So you got to sign off, Luke?
Yeah.
Well, you want to promote your stuff before you go, your channel and?
Yeah, sure. If people want to subscribe, feel free. It's Ancient Historia. I will be more active in the coming months. I usually say that before disappearing anyway. So, oops if I do that. But no, I will try and be a bit more active. So subscribe, check out the videos on Tartaria, stuff like that. I've got a few others. Some good interviews on there with people that have done some good work. So yeah.
Here I've got a link to your channel. Oh, whoops! I just took Shem out by accident. Got a link to your channel.
By accident. Get rid of him.
No, yeah, I'm trying to add something. Got a link to your channel here. Oh, whoops! Oh shit! Sorry, that was for something else. That was for my next interview. Here we go. This is Ancient Historia. Go give him a like and subscribe, guys. Talks politics, ancient history, and good stuff. Everything with a British accent, so he gets 20 IQ points added to anything he says.
Yeah, if you listen to me with an American, I just sound retarded.
Yeah, maybe. But no, I'm here. We got his channel here.
Do you still have the American channel, or did you delete it?
No, I've still got it going for one day. Hey, shush. It's a very secret.
I didn't say the name.
It's a very secret project. It's one day the people will know.
Really?
Anyway, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'll have to have you on my channel as well at some point.
Here we got your thing right here. You sound Australian in your channel. Why is that?
I don't know. Do I?
Here's his channel, guys. Go give him a subscribe. Get those numbers up. He needs money. He's a capitalist, guys. He's out here in this capitalist corporation. Guys, go hit youtube.com/corporation/ancient-historia.
Yeah, this is actually my entire game plan. This is my entire game plan, okay? I convince everyone else to give up their corporations, and in the last second, I sign up to have the only corporation and then laugh. Okay, it's the long con.
I think you're so communist, you're slowly developing an Australian accent. Only teasing.
No, if I was in any way Australian, I'd be pushing migrants off a mattress into the ocean.
Right. Just as Marx would have you do.
No, he'd check if they were religious first. You know, work, camp, or ocean. Make your choice.
Guys, go give him a like and subscribe. Check out his videos. We got Tartarian Truth in here, of course, too.
Don't check out that. Waste of time.
No, Shem's like an anime girl. He's like He's like, no, don't look at my channel. No.
I'm just being real.
Meanwhile, he's posting every single day to it.
Every couple of weeks. Yeah. Well, shout out to the chat. Have a good night, guys.
All right, yeah. Thank you very much. I'll catch you on the next one.
Peace, guys. Nice meeting you, Luke.
Bye.
Whew. All right, guys. Gonna sign off here. I'm gonna go to sleep. We've got stuff to promote. We've got close to 1,000 people here in the chat. You can go to the Dancing Elephant .shop. Guys, if you'd like to support the channel, you can go to dancingelephant.shop. Okay. If you'd like to support, you want to keep us going, maybe the live streams aren't your thing. We've got plenty of video productions, plenty of documentaries on the Old World of Florida YouTube channel. I'm on Instagram too. But basically, if you want to support, you can use the code OWF at dancingelephant.shop. So dancingelephant.shop, use the code OWF. That'll help me out. That'll help our store out, help my brother out. What else can you do? Here we got mods. Thank you, Jillian. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mar. Appreciate it. Best mods. Thanks to the mods, guys. Yep. Hey, finally that fucking communist is gone. We can shill our products. Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. No, just kidding. But yeah, code OWF for 10% off at Dancing Elephant. We have books. Lots of good books. Every truther needs some of these. Look at that, Dr. John Dee's Spiritual Diary. Oh my God. I have a copy of that thing. It's fucking huge. It's crazy. We've got Secret Teachings of All Ages on here. Lots of good entry-level stuff. Secret Teachings of All Ages, like I said. Astrology books. So go hit up dancingelephant.shop. Easy peasy. Code OWF. All right. What else can you do? You can go to the Moringa Man. Going to the moringaman.com. Easy peasy. The moringaman.com. When you go to the moringaman.com, you can use the code OWF. Well, no, excuse me. Sorry. Fuck, I'm going to get this all wrong. The code for Moringa Man is Old World Florida spelt out. Totally. Old World Florida. And that's going to get you, I think that's going to get you 15% off. And Moringa is super good. Moringa is, what does it say on here? 7 times the vitamin C in oranges. And it's one ingredient, by the way. It's just a shredded leaf. You can make a tea with it. You can just mix water into it. Little lemon. That's my favorite way. Little glass of water with moringa and lemon. I love that stuff. Moringa is super good for you. Makes you strong and healthy. 7 times the vitamin C in oranges. 4 times the beta carotene in carrots. 3 times the iron in spinach. 4 times the calcium in milk. 2 times the protein in milk. 3 times the potassium in bananas. And more fiber than oats. OMG. So get some moringa, guys. There's the code on screen right there. Old World Florida spelt out. 15% off at themoringaman.com. Easy peasy. Then we've got another way to support. This is all going to help me out, help the channel out. If you want to support, you've also got sipblue.com. Sipblue.com. This is another game changer product. This is butterfly pea flower tea. So butterfly pea flower tea, 1 ingredient, also a superfood, good for blood circulation, blood purity, activating dormant DNA, shifting your blood from red to blue, pretty out there stuff. Atlantean legacy, guys. Blue blood. Okay. Unlock your blue blood potential. You don't want to be a muggle. You don't want to be a mudblood. Okay, guys? Get your sip blue. Sip your sip blue like a good little blue baby. Like a good little blue boy. Blue boy, blue girl. Sip your sip blue. Reactivate your dormant Atlantean DNA. I mean, what do you got to lose? What do you got to lose? Get your blue blood on. Get your Mr. What do they call him? Dr. Manhattan, Mr. Manhattan. Get your little Dune juice going on. Fucking worm water. What do they call that in Dune when they drink the worm water? Oh my God. Really, really good for you. So same thing. This can just be put in water and it tastes good. Easy. Easy. Sip blue. This is a product I get behind. I can shill this stuff all goddamn day because it's amazing for you. Single ingredient. Florida businesses. Proud to promote these guys. These are friends too who've been supporting Old World Florida for a full year each before I ever supported their products. So this is authentic support from these guys. It worked out the way it did. And they're helping me out. So, YouTube doesn't let me make as much money off my videos as I should be, unfortunately. That's kind of always been the case, but Sip Blue, the Moringa Man, Dancing Elephant, all that stuff helps a lot. So if you made it to the tail end of the show, we don't like to stuff products down people's throats at the beginning of the show. I cringe when I see shows using, oh, buy my dude wipes, bro. Buy my dude wipes. Yeah, get Manscaped. Hey, yeah, so the Federal Reserve was founded in 1910. Break. Take a break, guys. Oh, yeah. Go get Manscaped, bro. Go get Manscaped. Here's your dude wipes for your uncleaned rear end. Oh, my God. These fucking people are embarrassing to the truther community. Dude wipes, Manscaped, and Blue Chews. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The Federal Reserve was founded in, brought to you by Blue Chew. Come on, guys. So, by the way, Sip Blue is as good as Blue Chew. Sip Blue is as good as Blue Chew, by the way. You can take doctor's orders on that one. So Sip Blue, you can use the code OWF. Code's OWF. And that'll help me out. They've got Shilajit on here too, sipblue.com. We've got Sip Blue, the flower of life tea. And we've got Shilajit too. We sell both these here in the store proudly. Got algae of life on there too. These are all one ingredient. So those ones are super good for you. And what else do we have? We have the Old World Florida Patreon. Thank you, Jillian and Mar, for dropping these links in the chat and stuff. Appreciate you guys. Mods. Patreon. We've got all of our shows archived on Patreon. Old World Florida. Some things are too spicy for YouTube, so they can't stay there. And they're safer on Patreon. So we're uploading to Patreon a lot more. And yeah, it'll just be safer, more protected from censorship. They can't demonetize a Patreon. So yeah, if you want to see stuff that's not on YouTube anymore, nothing's ever paywalled on this channel. If you're here, if you're staying up to date with us, you're going to get everything free no matter what, always. All my video presentations that I put a lot of work into, those are all free for everybody as soon as they release. No early release, no paywall, no half now, half later shit. The live streams, we just go live. We just hit live and just talk. So if if this is long-winded nonsense to you, well, forgive me. But give my video presentations a chance. Those things are pretty flipping good. And I stand by those. I stand by the video presentations. Whatever happens here on the live stream, this is just like talk radio, pretty much. I was arguing with Luke, or we were arguing with Luke, whatever. I'm not I could care less. He's a nice guy, and I like the videos he made. But whatever. Capitalist. We're capitalists here, guys. All a bunch of no good, dirty capitalists, I guess. But help us out. Patreon. Shit's good, guys. What else is there? Oh, you can go to Rumble. I'm on Rumble, guys. So you can go to Rumble and Old World Florida. I'm here. Old World Florida on Rumble. Go give me a follow, guys. I'm there. Don't have many friends on there yet, but yeah. Rumble, you can go give me a follow. Where else can you go? You can go to Twitter or X, whatever. Give us a follow on Twitter or X. Ooh, let's see what we got going on. Whatever. But nice. Shout out to Steve, my boy. Picked me up when my van broke down one time. Should go give Steve a follow. Shout out. Go hit him up, guys. He deserves it. Go give Steve a follow. Jacked. Lifter, bro. But he's a great supporter too. So it's funny, he just popped up. But you can go give him a like and follow too. But did I say Tumblr? Whoops. I meant to say Twitter. We're on Twitter. I've never had a Tumblr in my life. We're on Twitter. What else are we on? Oh, Twitch. Fucking we're on Twitch. I'm on Twitch, guys. Whatever. I do not know how to find that, but I'm on Twitch too, Old World Florida. I'm not really good at navigating that or anything. Old World Florida on Twitch, Old World Florida on X, Old World Florida on Patreon, Instagram too. I'm on Instagram, of course, but we're doing just fine over there. So I think we're pretty frozen on followers there anyway. But that's it. If you buy stuff from the shops I just showed you, make sure to use the links. Make sure to use the links to help me get cha-ching. But that's all for tonight. And yeah, no bad blood or anything. I have no issue contending with people. And Luke came on and stood by, his ideals and whatever. So no disrespect or anything. I'd be happy to talk with him again and go give him a follow if you liked what he had to say. And yeah, that's it. Closing thoughts. I guess here we'll shout you guys out. Say hi to you guys. Who we got in the chat? Drop an orange in the chat if you want me to shout you out by name. We still have 950 people in here. Oh my god. 950 people watching me fucking forget what I'm talking about on advertisements, bad advertisements. Drop an orange in the chat. Waterloo Bear. What's up, Paul? What's up, James? Birthday, bro. Gray Wind. That doesn't count as an orange, dude. Sorry, man. Artem. Are you the Artem that I used to work with? Artem who dropped the oranges. Drop a trident if you're the Artem that I used to valet cars with. Tony, what's up? Good to see you. Tony Clifton. Appreciate you. Thanks to Jillian. Hawkeye Pierce, what's up, yo? Rock and Rolla, what's up? My number one fan right there, Rock and Rolla. Always my number one fan. Oh, just teasing. Windows in the water. What's up? What's up? Thor at the door. Man, my back, Thor at the door, you cracked my back when you came to that meetup last time. And I swear, either my posture's, I've always had good posture, but you tweaked it or whatever. But I don't know if it's been readjusted to a more correct posture. But I've had a sore lower back ever since. But I don't think it's a bad thing. It's not like a debilitating thing. I think it's you set vertebra back in the right spot, and the muscles around it are re-strengthening or something. The weight is sitting as it should, and the muscles are catching up or whatever. But Thor at the door, RP. What's up, RP? Gray's Wind, that's more like it. Mar, everybody. Lucy Rose up. Hope I didn't miss anyone. But all right. That's it, everybody. You have a good night. Drop an orange in the chat or in the comment section. Drop us comments. How do you think we did? Are you guys team communist or whatever the opposite of capitalist would be, or where do you guys feel about everything? Oh, the Monad book. Thank you. Yeah. Here, let's promote that too. Thank you, Shem. If you'd like to help us, if you'd like to support us even more, this is more immediate, more pressing, guys. If you'd like to get a copy of The Monad, my brother's first published book. He's the publisher, not the author, but it's still a lot of hard work and a great feat. Publishing this compendium of Neoplatonic works is this is a remarkable asset for any truther to have this book, Monad, roughly 800 pages of. It's like 3 books in one, 3 different Neoplatonists contributing to this, to this. And the intro is by Ken Wheeler. So you can go to gallowglassbooks.shop and buy a copy of the Monad for $60. You can order it right now. It'll be out to you not long from now, but it's available now for purchase, but it's going to take, I don't know, a week or 2 to ship from now, maybe a little more. But go get a copy of the Monad, just Monad. Plotinus, Porphyry, and Proclus. There's a great section in there about vegetarianism, where whatever. But there's no code on this one. So no code on the Monad, not yet. Just grab a copy of this, and this will be helping my brother out regardless. So appreciate you guys. Thanks for all the support. Thanks for staying through to the end. Oh, shit. That was a big firework or something. Just went off right outside the store. But what else can we say? That's it. Well, just grab a copy of the Monad, guys. That's all. All right. 900 in the chat, almost 1,000 in the chat. We hit 1,000 briefly, but where are all you guys? Are you all on Twitter? Here, let's go look.
Something.
Damn, so there's only 230 in YouTube. Where's the other 700 people coming from? Holy shit. Adam Lipsky, thanks for the 249. Appreciate it. Shem Jacobs, thanks for the $5. Thanks for reminding me too. Dickie Goodman, thanks for the $4.99. Saw you earlier. Enjoy that super sticker, bruh. Don't smoke it all at once, dude. Yeah, you can still order the Monad, 100%. Gallowglassbooks.shop. Buy a copy of the Monad. Hell yeah. The pre-sale is over, but you can still buy it. You can buy it 100%. So, all right, everyone. Well, I guess I'm fucking booming on Twitter or something. Where are all these people coming from? Only 200 in YouTube, but there's 700 more people in here from somewhere else, either Twitter or whatever. All right, guys, gonna wrap it up here, and thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, shout out to Luke, shout out to Shem. You know, can't blame the Brits for being salty, I guess. Not, I'm only teasing. But peace, adios, good night. Quit drinking, quit eating corpses. Life will get a lot better. That goes for everyone out there. Scarcity mindset doesn't serve us. Lord gave us dominion over the Garden of Eden and all the animals in it and nature as a whole. So as long as we're wielding that power responsibly, man's meant to stomp out a foothold, carve out a piece of nature for himself. And you know, God and Mother Nature don't allow things to go on that isn't serving their grand design and plan. So there's really nothing to be afraid of in the long run. So whatever. Peace. Adios. Good night.